Chapter 4884. Sigh. Xian Xiaozi sighed and kept all the items. He thought to himself, it's better to be practical. Let's listen to how the other sects choose their disciples. Even if I can't pass the tribulation, I can't let the fallen celestial sect continue to decline in my hands. With that thought in mind, Xian Xiaozi's divine thought was about to leave his body. However, at that moment he caught sight of the lone jade slip in his storage ring. Instantly, Xian Xiaozi recalled Huang Su's words and expression. His heart skipped a beat as he seemed to have understood something. He knew a lot about Huang Su's character, and knew that if there was nothing important, this guy would never make a trip to Night Wind Valley with such great fanfare. Although the Royal Dome Spiritual Master's relic was important, why would Huang Su leave a jade slip in his storage ring if there was nothing more important? Xian Xiaozi took out the jade slip and inserted his divine thought into it. As soon as Xian Xiaozi saw it, a look of disbelief appeared on his face. In fact, he almost jumped up from the tree leaf. How is this possible? The Chanha sect has a spiritual root selection technique? Xian Xiaozi exclaimed. Maybe there's even a modified technique? 10 disciples of the Kanxian Hall, including Zhijun, went missing because of this? Suddenly, Alliance Master Wenjie's voice rang in Xian Xiaozi's ears. Xian Xiaozi of the Fallen Celestial Sect, does your Fallen Celestial Sect have a spiritual root selection technique? Huh! Xian Xiaozi was stunned. He looked at Wenjie in confusion and asked, Alliance Master Wen, why is it my Fallen Celestial Sect's turn so soon? Xian Xiaozi, you must be distracted. Yu Jiangling whispered. After the Lu Hong Celestial Alliance, it was the Lofty Creek Celestial Alliance's turn. The Alliance Master saw that the spiritual root selection techniques of the various sects were similar and there was nothing new. If he were to list them one by one, wouldn't it take more than 10 days? He asked the Alliance Masters to collect the spiritual root selection techniques of the various sects and clans. If there's nothing new, there's no need to report it. Of course, if there's anything new, the Alliance Master said that he'll reward you handsomely. Xian Xiaozi? Wenjie smiled. If the Fallen Celestial Sect doesn't have anything to try, don't force yourself. He's only at the late body integration stage. What secret technique could he possibly have? Li Pan couldn't see through the sect leader and the family head. Seeing this, he couldn't help but snort coldly. Hee. Xian Xiaozi looked at Li Pan with disdain as well and laughed coldly. How could a rogue cultivator like you know the true strength of the fallen immortal sect? Even though you're already at the early stage of the great vehicle stage, you can't compare to the foundation of the fallen immortal sect. As he spoke, Xian Xiaozi stood up and raised his hand. Lord Alliance Leader, I have a spirit root selection method here. It seems to be quite unique and I can provide you with a reference. Although Taoist Ji Yen and Old Man Gu Qiong were a little disappointed, they still kept their eyes on the Alliance meeting. When they saw the group of cultivators passing the jade slips to their Alliance Master in an orderly manner, a cultivator at the edge of the group stood up and immediately pricked up their ears. Spiritual roots? Ji Yen and Old Man Gu Qiong were stunned and looked at each other in confusion. Old Man Gu Qiong asked pleasantly, Who are you? What is this spiritual root you're talking about? After Old Man Gu Qiong spoke, the Alliance meeting fell silent again. Apart from the cultivators who were passing the jade slips to the Alliance Master, everyone's eyes fell on Xian Xiaozi. Xian Xiaozi took a deep breath and replied, I'm Xian Xiaozi from the Fallen Immortal Sect of the Tsiupu Immortal Alliance's Fengyan Kingdom. I've obtained a secret technique for selecting disciples called the Spiritual Root Selection Method. Although I haven't fully comprehended it, I feel that although this secret technique is profound, it's simple and easy to learn. Moreover, it's very likely that there's a cultivation technique that's related to this spiritual root selection method. Oh, so you obtained it. You didn't comprehend it yourself. Old Man Gu Qiong smiled and was about to say something when he suddenly realized that Xian Xiaozi's secret technique wasn't worth his time. However, if Xian Xiaozi obtained it from someone else, it might be of some value. Hence, his smile disappeared and he hurriedly asked, What is this spiritual root? How did you obtain this cultivation technique? Alliance Master, He can't see what this spiritual root is. Moreover, the cultivation technique doesn't mention what this spiritual root is. Xian Xiaozi's forehead was covered in sweat when he realized that he didn't answer this question. He hurriedly replied, "It said that this cultivation technique was comprehended by a senior who went into seclusion before the spiritual qi of heaven and earth changed." Oh, he created this secret technique when he came out of seclusion and saw the change in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Who? Which fellow Taoist? Ji Yan couldn't help but ask. Senior Zhang Xiaohua. Huang Su naturally learned Xiaohua's name from Yu Zhuohong and recorded the entire process in detail in the jade slip. Huang Su didn't dare to hide anything from Yu Zhuohong. Boom. Before Ji Yan could speak, most of the cultivators laughed. Not only because they had never heard of a senior with this name, but also because this name was too rustic. It didn't sound like the name of a senior expert at all. However, Ji Yan didn't laugh. Old man Gu Qiong didn't laugh either. Even the tribulation-passing cultivators on the tree crown didn't laugh. The reason was simple. Even though Xian Xiaozi was not a high-level cultivator, he was still the sect leader of a sect. Many of the methods to select disciples had already appeared in the Dao Alliance, and Xian Xiaozi must have heard of them. Now that he was able to come up with a selection method that even he himself could not explain, it meant that either the selection method was a castle in the sky, a mere pretense, or it was a unique method of its own. As for the name, it was just a few words. Who would take it seriously? Old man Gu Qiong had a premonition that only tribulation-transcending cultivators would have. He even had a feeling that there was always a way out. Suppressing the surprise in his heart, he asked aloud, "Xian Xiaozi, are you sure you don't know what this spiritual root is? And can this spiritual root really select disciples?" "Of course, I'm very sure." Xian Xiaozi nodded and said, "This spiritual root is completely different from the bone sifting and origin sifting. I can't understand it at all. As for the selection of disciples, I only know that the Chanhe sect of the Fengyan kingdom used this secret technique to select thousands of disciples." Buzz. This time, the commotion didn't come from other places but from the tree crown. Apart from the Yi clan's patriarch, Ji Yanzhenren, and old man Gu Qiong, the other tribulation-passing cultivators couldn't help but whisper among themselves. They didn't know what kind of sect the Chanhe sect was. However, even though it was an unknown sect, it was still able to select thousands of disciples when the spiritual qi of heaven and earth changed. Regardless of what kind of cultivation method they had, this number was still shocking. The Yi clan's patriarch glanced at old man Gu Qiong and said, "Xian Xiaozi, how are the talents of these thousands of disciples? How's their cultivation progress?" Xian Xiaozi said respectfully, "Senior, I don't know. I only received a message from my disciple, Huang Su, before I entered the Alliance conference. Recently, about a month ago, the disciples of the Chanhe sect discovered the location where the fallen Immortal sect's spiritual master Huang Qiong failed to transcend the tribulation near the western wild mountain range of the Fengyan kingdom. They met Senior Zhang Xiaohua, who had just come out of seclusion. Then, Senior Zhang Xiaohua temporarily stayed in the nebula ridge of the Chanhe sect and taught the Chanhe sect the method of selecting spirit roots. According to Yu Zhuohong of the Chanhe sect, Senior Zhang promised to modify the cultivation method for Lu Hanhuan, the sect leader of the Chanhe sect. However, Lu Hanhuan was afraid of getting into trouble and didn't dare to agree. "I think these disciples who were selected haven't cultivated yet." "Ha, I see." Wanderer Fu Bo laughed. "It's just a cultivation method that hasn't been tested yet. It really gave me a shock. I really didn't expect that there would be a cultivator more powerful than Senior Gu Qiong in the Yilan continent who could create a more miraculous method than the origin sifting." "Oh? In that case, Huang Qiong Zhenren, who was the first to fail the tribulation, has already been found?" Perfected Ji Yan was disappointed when he heard that. He no longer wanted to find out more about the method to select spiritual roots and change the topic. "Vice Alliance leader, that's indeed the case," Xian Xiaozi replied. "However, I haven't looked into it in detail. If I find anything valuable, I'll pass it to Alliance leader Wen Jie of the Chupu Immortal Alliance. He'll pass it on to the Dao Alliance." "Great!" Perfected Ji Yen smiled. Make a copy of the jade slip with the method to select spiritual roots and pass it to Wuxia. After he passes it on to the Tao Alliance, if it's useful, I'll definitely severely injure the fallen immortal sect. Yes, I understand. Xian Xiaozi had achieved his goal when he heard that his name had reached Perfected Ji Yan's ears. He looked at Wuxia, whose face was filled with gratitude, and was about to make a copy of the jade slip. At that moment, an unhappy voice said impatiently, Xian Xiaozi, tell me about the secret method to select spiritual roots. That voice belonged to old man Gu Qiong. He had wanted to take the jade slip from Xian Xiaozi's mouth, but Wanderer Fu Bo and Perfected Ji Yen had interrupted him, so he couldn't say anything. Seeing that Perfected Ji Yen was looking down on Xian Xiaozi, he couldn't help but speak up. Perfected Ji Yen was stunned and shook his head with a bitter smile. He really didn't think much of it because he felt that old man Gu Qiong didn't care about the affairs of the Tao Alliance and didn't know what the cultivators of the Tao Alliance were thinking. Xian Xiaozi's actions were clearly trying to please the crowd. Xian Xiaozi was naturally even happier. He glanced at Li Pan proudly and took out the jade slip. He immersed his divine thought into it and read, word by word, those who possess spiritual roots are the roots of the heaven and earth bell spirit in the cultivator's body. They can contain the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and form spiritual cavities for the cultivator's use. This is the method to select the spiritual roots. Chapter 4885. Xian Xiaozi's voice was neither fast nor slow as he explained the spiritual root selection method that Xiaohua had given to the Chanhe sect. The cultivation method was not very long, but it covered the 5 elemental spiritual roots of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and even the wind, thunder, ice, and other mutated spiritual roots. It even included the obscure light and darkness spiritual roots that no one had ever heard of before. As Gu Qiong old man listened, his expression changed drastically. He opened his mouth several times, wanting to speak, but he held himself back. When Xian Xiaozi finally finished, Gu Qiong old man immediately shouted, Ji Yen! Quick, bring this jade slip to me at all costs. But Ji Yen was naturally fascinated. Regardless of whether Xiaohua's spiritual root selection method was correct or not, Ji Yen could tell from the completeness and rigor of the cultivation method that it was not something that could be created in a few days or months. It was also not something that his or Gu Qiong old man's cultivation method could compare to. He nodded and pressed down on the tree trunk below him. With a loud bang, the crown of the tree shook violently. Clusters of dark green light appeared all over the tree like the brilliance of the moon and stars. These lights did not appear from top to bottom in an orderly manner, nor did they appear from Ji Yen to Xian Xiaozi. Instead, they appeared from the roots, branches, and trunk in a disorderly manner. In the end, a branch that was extremely far away from Xian Xiaozi trembled rapidly, and an extremely dazzling halo appeared like a star. At the same time, a palm-sized whirlpool suddenly appeared on the branch in front of Xian Xiaozi. Black and white threads of light appeared from the whirlpool, and waves of desolate coldness emanated from it. At this moment, Ji Yan's voice came from the whirlpool. Xian Xiaozi, quickly put the jade slip in. My lifespan is starting to run out. Yes, senior. Xian Xiaozi was shocked and did not dare to delay. He hurriedly threw the jade slip into the whirlpool. The moment the jade slip landed on the branch, a dark green light flashed, and the whirlpool quickly disappeared. The dazzling star in the distance also dimmed, whoosh. When the light on the Tree of Alliances was extinguished, Taoist Ji Yen raised his hand. In his hand was the jade slip that Xian Xiaozi had placed in the vortex. Hearing this, Taoist Ji Yen let out a long sigh and smiled bitterly. I'm ashamed. It's just retrieving a jade slip through the Tao tree, and I am already somewhat powerless. Hee, fellow Taoist Ji Yen has already done well. The Yi clan patriarch laughed. Don't be fooled by how short this distance is. Fellow Taoist, this divine ability of yours has already traversed nearly half of the Yilin continent. In the entire Tao Alliance, you are probably the only one with such power. Alas! Old man Gu Qiong sighed. The change in spiritual energy is a great tribulation of heaven and earth, and we have no choice but to face it. Ji Yanjinren nodded and waved the jade slip in his hand. The great Tao is just. There will always be a way for people to survive. Although the world's spirit energy has only been here for a few hundred years, we can't find a way to survive. The further we go, the more helpless we will be. I hope this so-called spiritual root selection method can help us find a glimmer of hope. Jian, take a look at this. Old man Gu Qiong calmed down when he saw the jade slip. He smiled and said, I only listened to it once and didn't think about it carefully. However, it seems that this is indeed a complete cultivation method and not something that was randomly made up. You're right, Senior. Ji Yanjinren nodded and said, I've noticed it too. Although this cultivation method is marvelous, the incantation is easy to understand. Even nascent soul cultivators and golden core cultivators can practice it, let alone us. It's very similar to the disciple selection method that my Dao sect usually uses. Ji Yanjinren didn't stand on ceremony and scanned the jade slip with his divine sense. Listening to Xian Xiaozi recite it once and scanning it with his divine sense was different. Ji Yanjinren's expression was grave as he scanned the jade slip. After a few minutes, he withdrew his divine sense and took out a blank jade slip without hesitation. He copied the cultivation method in it and handed it to old man Gu Qiong. He said in a low voice, Senior, take a look. I seem to see something in this cultivation method. Ji Yanjinren didn't finish his sentence. He looked at Xian Xiaozi and said loudly, Xian Xiaozi, you've done a great service to the Dao Alliance. Needless to say, the Dao Alliance will reward you handsomely after this. Xian Xiaozi was overjoyed. He had already seen the importance of this cultivation method from how much old man Gu Qiong valued it. The reward was beyond his expectations. He smiled and replied, I'm a member of the Dao Alliance. Although the fallen Immortal sect is at the edge of the Dao Alliance, under the leadership of Alliance Master Wuxia, all the countries are loyal to the Dao Alliance. It's my honor to be able to contribute to the Dao Alliance. Good, it's good that you have such intentions. Ji Yanjinren said perfunctorily and looked at old man Gu Qiong. Old man Gu Qiong studied the jade slip for a much longer time than Ji Yanjinren. His expression was more interesting than Ji Yan's. His expression was grave at first, then shock, then amazement, emotion, admiration, and sighs. All kinds of emotions flashed across his face like flowers. The Yi family's patriarch and the others were puzzled. They couldn't help but recite the spiritual root selection method that Xian Xiaozi had just recited. Wonderful! 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 In the end, old man Gu Qiong closed his eyes and held the jade slip in his hand. He opened his mouth and exclaimed 3 times. His voice penetrated the space and caused the entire alliance tree to tremble 3 times. Seeing old man Gu Qiong open his eyes, Ji Yanjinren asked in a low voice, Senior, did you see the secret behind it? Ji Yan, if you can see it, why can't I? Old man Gu Qiong smiled and said, although this spiritual root is illusory and I can't see what it is, I can still sense the shadow of witchcraft. I've studied the incomplete book from the Wuming mountain range in my early years. Although I'm not proficient in it, I can still sense the faint traces. How should we deal with this spiritual root selection method? Ji Yanjinren seemed to be asking, but he seemed to have made a decision long ago. Old man Gu Qiong replied without hesitation, all rivers flow into the sea, and all rivers flow into one. At this point, can we still be constrained by factions? Ji Yanjinren clapped his hands and said, yes, I agree with you, Senior. Then Ji Yanjinren raised his voice and said, yes, Alliance Master. Reward the fallen Immortal sect. Immediately, make a copy of this jade slip and distribute it to the various sects, clans, and sects of our Dao Alliance. Regardless of Mo Wen's background, I guarantee that everyone will have a copy. When the cultivators of the Dao Alliance heard this, they were all shocked. They knew very well that the Dao Alliance had passed down countless techniques since its founding, but none of them had ever been so highly valued by the Alliance Lord, nor had there ever been a technique that would require every single sect to acquire one. Also, old man Gu Qiong said with a smile, while making a copy of the jade slip, Find 10,000 disciples from the factions near the Dragon Tomb who are waiting to be selected. We'll test this spiritual root selection method on the spot during the Alliance meeting. But I'll pass down the order right away. Taoist Jiyan replied and whispered a few words to the ground. He raised his hand and a jade slip fell down. There was a flash of light at the top of the tree and a figure flashed by. The jade slip disappeared along with the figure. Clearly, a disciple of the Tao Alliance had left to carry out the order. I hope the selected disciples will be able to cultivate it. Old man Gu Qiong said with a smile. However, before he could finish his sentence, he was taken aback. He took out the jade slip again and looked at it. Then he asked Xian Shaozi, why isn't there any spiritual root cultivation technique in this jade slip? Alliance Master. Xian Shaozi hurriedly stood up and replied innocently, I've already said that my disciple of the fallen Immortal sect just obtained this cultivation technique from Xingyun Ridge. The sect leader of the Chanha sect is hesitant to modify this cultivation technique. Hiss. Old man Gu Qiong gasped and stood up abruptly. Xian Shaozi, didn't you just say that your disciple went missing when he returned to the sect? That's right. I'm not too sure about the details. Xian Shaozi seemed to have understood something as well. He quickly nodded and said, however, they went missing when they were returning to the sect to deliver the other set of spiritual root selection methods. Damn it. Jiyan Jinren clapped his hands and said, this must be the doing of the Heaven Alliance. The Fengyan Nation is located at the edge of the Tao Alliance, and it rarely interacts with the Heaven Alliance. I don't think the Heaven Alliance would extend its reach that far. However, Xian Shaozi, there must be a spy from the Heaven Alliance among your missing disciples. But these disciples. Xian Shaozi wanted to say that these disciples were the trusted subordinates of the fallen Immortal sect from all over the Fengyan Nation. However, when he thought about it, even Perfected West Moon was a member of the Heaven Alliance. It was not strange that Exiled King or Exiled King's disciples were from the Heaven Alliance. Oh no! Gu Qiong old man was even more shocked when he heard Jiyan's words. He exchanged a look with Jiyan Jinren and said in unison, the Chanha sect is in danger. Hurry! Jiyan Jinren lowered his head to give the order, but before he could say anything he turned to the branch where Xian Shaozi was and roared thunderously, where are the disciples of the Tao Alliance guarding the Night Wind Valley? I'm here. A disciple wearing armor appeared on a tree branch next to Chu Pu Immortal Alliance's Wenjie Alliance Master. Vice Alliance Master, what are your orders? Send 10,000 of the most powerful disciples in the Night Wind Valley. Head to the Fengyan Nation's Nebula Ridge as soon as possible to protect the Chanha sect and invite the sect master of the Chanha sect, as well as the disciples related to Zhang Xiaohua to the Tao Alliance. Jiyan Jinren ordered without hesitation. Yes, I understand. The Tao Alliance disciple was clearly confused, but he quickly bowed and was about to disappear. Chapter 4886. Remember, it's urgent. Set up the Continental Teleportation Bridge at all costs. If there's any delay, I'll kill all of you. Jiyan Jinren had been very humble ever since Elder Gu Qiong arrived, but now he couldn't help but show his decisiveness and hurriedly added. The Tao Alliance disciple's heart skipped a beat. He wanted to reply, but after a moment of hesitation he immediately hid his thoughts. After the Tao Alliance disciple left, Jiyan Jinren was relieved. He handed the copied jade slip to the Yi family patriarch who was not far away and said with a smile, fellow Taoist, take a look. Is it comparable to your modified cultivation technique? The Yi family patriarch took the jade slip and said with a smile, I have just thought about the spiritual root selection technique from the beginning to the end several times. This is a complete cultivation technique without any flaws. It's not comparable to Ai's crude cultivation technique. Now, I am looking forward to seeing what's so special about fellow Taoist Zhang's modified cultivation technique. This fellow Taoist Zhang's name is very unfamiliar. Fairy Mo Yun was puzzled. He doesn't seem to be a tribulation-passing cultivator of our Tao Alliance, right? There are two possibilities. Wonder Fu Bo said with a smile, this Zhang Xiaohua is not a tribulation-passing cultivator. He might be a Mahayana cultivator or a body integration cultivator. We've never heard of him. The other possibility is that this fellow Taoist is an itinerant cultivator who is unknown. There's another possibility. Ji Yanjinren's heart skipped a beat and he said in a low voice, he might be a cultivator of the Heaven Alliance. Impossible. Yu Hongzi shook his head and said, I've never seen a cultivator of the Heaven Alliance helping our Tao Alliance so generously. No. Hearing Ji Yanjinren mention the Heaven Alliance, Elder Gu Qiong, who had just sat down, stood up again and said, I'm worried. Since a disciple of the fallen Immortal sect has gone missing for a long time, I'm still worried. If that fellow Taoist is still in Xingyun Ridge, it's fine. If he's not, how can the Heaven Alliance not see the importance of fellow Taoist Zhang's modified cultivation technique? I'm afraid your disciple won't make it in time. Moreover, if fellow Taoist Zhang is still in Xingyun Ridge, I'm afraid we'll only send a disciple. There will be a problem, fellow Taoist Zhang. I don't think so, Lord Alliance Master. Yu Hongzi smiled and said, as Wanderer Fu Bo said, Zhang Xiaohua may not be a cultivator who has transcended the tribulation. Lord Alliance Master, you don't have to make such a big fuss. Furthermore, from the Dragon's Tomb to the Feng Yen Kingdom, fellow Taoist Ji Yen had to go through so much trouble just to retrieve a jade slip. Lord Alliance Master had to cross half of the Yilin continent. Why don't we wait for the disciples of the Tao Alliance in Nightwind Valley? Instead of looking at Yu Hongzi, Elder Gu Qiong said to Ji Yanjinren, it doesn't matter whether she is a tribulation transcendence cultivator or not. What matters is that Zhang Xiaohua is a reclusive genius, so we can't treat her lightly. Ji Yanjinren nodded slightly, indicating that he understood Elder Gu Qiong's meaning. He replied, since that's the case, Lord Alliance Master, you can go. We'll make preparations here to test the spirit root technique while preparing to welcome fellow Taoist Zhang Xiaohua. As soon as Ji Yan finished speaking, Elder Gu Qiong slapped his forehead, and a fiery red light shot up into the sky like a volcanic eruption. Then, a 90-meter-tall nascent soul wearing spirit armor flew out of the light. As soon as the nascent soul appeared, an overwhelming aura emanated from the nascent soul, enveloping the surrounding space. Light and shadow distorted, and even the alliance tree wrinkled and swayed in this light and shadow. Immediately, the nascent soul made a gesture with both hands, and a strange light silk more dense than a spider web fell into the void. In front of the nascent soul, a few acres of space began to boil, and layers of thin bubbles flashed with black and white halos rushed out. After a moment, the nascent soul put his hands together and pushed toward the space. Shwa! The black and white halos twisted and formed a vortex. Then, the nascent soul swung its arms as if it was grinding a mill, and the vortex gradually grew larger and rapidly spread into the depths of the void. What was special was that the vortex grew larger, and rumbling sounds came from the vortex. Countless small snake-like black thunderbolts appeared in the cracks of the vortex, and the entire space began to shake. Good heavens! Lightning flashed on the Yi family ancestor's face, and he couldn't help but whisper, I haven't seen Elder Gu Qiong for 1,000 years, and his strength has reached such a level. I can't compare to him. As soon as the Yi family ancestor finished speaking, a three-colored light suddenly flashed around the nascent soul. This light and shadow came from the nascent soul's four limbs and rapidly gathered between its eyebrows. A star-shaped mark appeared in the blink of an eye. A nascent soul projection? The Yi family ancestor was stunned. He looked at Elder Gu Qiong's nascent soul in disbelief and whispered in his heart, how can a nascent soul have a nascent soul projection? What's going on? Before the Yi family ancestor could figure it out, Elder Gu Qiong's nascent soul swayed and fell into the void vortex, disappearing in a moment. When the black and white thunderbolts gradually disappeared, the space vortex also disappeared. Vagabond Fu Bo blinked his eyes and looked at the crowd. Then he said to Ji Yanjinren, Deputy Alliance Leader, forgive me for speaking out of turn. I'm just an itinerant cultivator and I'm ignorant. I seem to have seen the Heavenly Alliance's primordial spirit projection technique. Moreover, I don't understand. From the Dragon Tomb to the Feng Yen Kingdom, we have to cross half of the Yilin continent. Even if Senior Gu Qiong is proficient in the void escape technique of the nascent soul realm, He can't go there directly, right? Hee hee. Ji Yen spiritual master laughed and said, "This is Elder Gu Qiong's secret technique, and he usually doesn't show it to others. However, since he used it in front of everyone today, it seems that he has no intention of hiding it anymore. Then I'll explain it to you. What you saw was right. Elder Gu Qiong used the nascent soul projection technique, which is rare even among the cultivators of the Heavenly Alliance. However, this nascent soul projection technique is different from that of the Heavenly Alliance. We cultivators of the Tao Alliance don't have powerful nascent souls. After Elder Gu Qiong modified it, he can use his nascent soul. Also, our physical bodies can't use the void escape technique, but nascent souls are spiritual bodies and can withstand the pressure of the void. If I'm not wrong, Elder Gu Qiong first used the void escape technique to let his nascent soul get as close to the Fengyan kingdom as possible. When his nascent soul couldn't escape, he used the nascent soul projection technique to project his nascent soul to the Xingyun Ridge. Elder Gu Qiong's Dharma spells are too wonderful. We can't compare to him. A cultivator who was in the Tribulation Transcendence realm side. This step involves the nascent soul escape technique and the improved nascent soul projection technique. He has all kinds of wonderful Dharma spells at his fingertips. I can't believe it. Since Elder Gu Qiong has gone, the Xingyun Ridge will be fine. The Yi family's patriarch said meaningfully, "Deputy Alliance Leader, should we ask Xian Xiaozi to tell us about the Chanhe sect? The Chanhe sect should be heavily rewarded." That's right. Perfected Ji Yen nodded and said, "You're right, fellow Taoisti. I didn't mention the Chanhe sect just now because it's a small sect that isn't listed in the Tao Alliance's list. Even if I told them about it, they wouldn't know. After the Alliance meeting, I'll definitely ask my disciples to reward them heavily." Then, Perfected Ji Yen looked at Xian Xiaozi and said, "Tell us about the Chanhe sect." This. Xian Xiaozi was at a loss for words. After all, the Chanhe sect was too small. It was only a sect led by a nascent soul realm cultivator. There were at least dozens of such sects in the Fengyan kingdom, if not hundreds. How would he know? Left with no choice, Xian Xiaozi turned to look at Wenjie. He was probably asking for help. Wenjie also wanted to help Xian Xiaozi, but he wasn't from the Fengyan kingdom, so it was even more impossible for him to know about the Chanhe sect. He could only shrug at Xian Xiaozi helplessly. Deputy Alliance Leader. Xian Xiaozi thought for a while and smiled apologetically. The Chanhe sect is an extremely small sect. Their sect leader seems to be only a nascent soul realm cultivator. The ordinary hall masters of the fallen immortal sect are all spirit-severing disciples. Therefore, I really don't know much about the Chanhe sect. Oh, right, the deputy hall master of the fallen immortal sect, Huang Su, was the one who went to the Nebula Ridge. He was also the one who gave me the jade slip before I entered the Alliance meeting. Oh, if that's the case, once the Alliance meeting begins, the Night Wind Valley's teleportation formation will be sealed. Without the Alliance token, no one will be able to use it. Huang Su will only be able to leave if he uses an escape technique. Perfected Ji Yen thought for a while and said, "Furthermore, the Night Wind Valley is surrounded by strong winds. Who would be so bored as to barge in?" The disciple stationed at the Night Wind Valley summoned the fallen immortal sect's disciple, Huang Su, to enter the Alliance meeting. Yes, disciple obeys. Another voice came from the tree next to Wenjie. The figure disappeared in a flash. Everyone was waiting. The Tribulation Transcendence cultivators on the tree crown were copying the spirit root selection technique while discussing the secret technique. Alliance leader Wenjie smiled at Xian Xiaozi and said, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist. Our Chu Pu Immortal Alliance has never been so popular in the Tao Alliance meeting. Today, we are all basking in your glory. We're really in the limelight today." "You're too kind. Isn't this all thanks to Alliance leader Wen's leadership?" Xian Xiaozi said flatteringly. Li Pan snorted coldly. "This is the glory of the Chanhe sect. What does it have to do with the fallen immortal sect? If the fallen immortal sect wasn't a member of the Tao Alliance, how would you be rewarded so generously? Stealing other people's credit to make yourself look good? You're really capable of that." Isn't this the legendary Shameless? Li Pan's words were like swallowing a disgusting fly in Xian Xiaozi's ears. However, Li Pan's words weren't wrong at all. Xian Xiaozi's face flushed red. He was speechless again. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, bookmark it, or tip it. Also, I was supposed to rest today. However, since the Alliance leader of Basking in the Moonlight 5 is here, I'll continue to update. Thank you, fellow Taoists, for your support. There are no more chapters left. Chapter 4887. Hee hee. When Jie smiled and said, "Don't be jealous, fellow Taoist Li. This is fate." Although the Chanhe sect met Senior Zhang Xiaohua, they didn't know the importance of the spiritual root selection technique. More importantly, although they are in the Tao Alliance, they can't participate in the Alliance conference directly. Therefore, they could only borrow fellow Taoist Xian Xiaozi's hand and offer up the spiritual root selection technique. As the saying goes, a fine steed is common, but a talent scout is rare. Isn't this the reason? Li Pan didn't mock Wen Jie because of his status as the alliance leader of the Immortal Alliance. He only looked at Xian Xiaozi with disdain. While everyone was discussing, Wen Jie felt that the branch he was on was trembling. Then, he hurriedly got up and saw that there was a sudden fluctuation at the junction between the branch and the trunk. The fluctuation spread out like ripples, and the outline of a door gradually appeared at the edge of the branch. With a soft sound, Huang Su's figure appeared from the door. There was a hint of excitement on his slightly panicked face. Just as Taoist Ji Yen had expected, Huang Su and Yu Kong returned to the teleportation array. The array was surrounded by the Tao Alliance's disciples and sealed off the area. How could Huang Su let go of the opportunity to show off in front of Xian Xiaozi? He found a quiet place with Yu Kong and chatted while waiting for the Alliance conference to end. They waited for a few days. Huang Su didn't seem to be impatient. Just as the two of them were talking about the interesting things about the Fengyan kingdom, a thunderous voice rang out nearby. Dozens of spirit-severing stage cultivators flew out of the Night Wind Valley in an orderly formation and called out Huang Su's name. Huang Su was shocked and had a premonition. He knew that the spiritual root selection technique must have taken effect. Therefore, he quickly flew into the sky and agreed. After the Tao Alliance's disciples verified his identity, they immediately brought Huang Su back to the Alliance conference, leaving Yu Kong confused. Of course, just as Huang Su's figure disappeared, Yu Kong came to a realization. He stomped his feet and gritted his teeth. Damn it, this guy must be hiding something from me. Unfortunately, even if Yu Kong knew, what could he do? Since Huang Su had joined the Alliance conference, his status would definitely be on par with Yu Kong in the fallen Immortal sect. Yu Kong wouldn't be able to do anything to Huang Su. Huang Su naturally understood this as well. Therefore, the moment he stepped into the Alliance, he first looked at the humongous tree in shock. When his gaze landed on Xian Xiaozi, who was sitting cross-legged on a leaf not far away, he immediately wanted to walk over. Unfortunately, it was as if there was an impenetrable wall around Huang Su. He was unable to move at all. Thus, Huang Su came to a halt and bowed towards Xian Xiaozi. Greetings, Sect Master. I've come here on the orders of the Alliance leader. Taoist Ji Yen, Taoist Ji, Taoist Ji. Xian Xiaozi was very satisfied with Huang Su's attitude. However, with a look of panic, he raised his hand and gestured for Huang Su to look at the treetop. Huang Su couldn't tell who Ji Yen was, so he hurriedly bowed and said, "Junior greets Ji Yen." "Get up, Huang Su," Taoist Ji Yen said calmly. "You have contributed greatly to the Tao Alliance by delivering the spiritual root selection method. After the Alliance conference, I will reward the fallen Immortal sect. You will be rewarded as well. Thank you, Taoist Ji Yen." Huang Su was moved to tears when he heard Taoist Ji Yen's generosity. Taoist Ji Yen continued to ask, "However, how did you know that the Chanhe sect has this spiritual root selection method? How did you get your hands on it? Also, Taoist Zhang Xiaohua, what does she look like? Just wait. Tell me everything you know." Although Huang Su had a guilty conscience, he did not panic. He knew very well that his dealings with the Flying Shadow sect, were nothing compared to his own contributions. Therefore, he didn't hide anything. He told Taoist Jiyan everything and stood there respectfully. However, after waiting for a few minutes, there was no sound from the tree. It was as though Taoist Jiyan didn't hear Huang Su's report. Huang Su was slightly surprised and looked up at the tree. On the top of the tree, perfected Jiyan was just like the Yi clan's patriarch and the others. They looked confused and frowned slightly as if they were thinking about something. Even Wanderer Fu Bo and the others looked at each other with their mouths moving. No one knew what they were saying. Huang Su, you mean? After a few seconds, Taoist Jiyan finally said, Zhang Xiaohua subdued all the beasts of the Flying Shadow sect with a roar? Huang Su nodded. I saw it with my own eyes. Also, you couldn't sense Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation and couldn't see the fluctuation of his magic power when he flew. Yes, that's right. Huang Su answered without hesitation. Could it be? The Yi clan's patriarch hesitated. We made a big fuss over nothing? This spiritual root selection method wasn't created by Zhang Xiaohua. He got it from somewhere else? Huang Su, do you know? Taoist Jiyan asked loudly. Huang Su thought for a while and answered, I don't know. I only got this method from Yu Zhuohong, a disciple of the Chanhe sect. However, Yu Zhuohong said that Senior Zhang taught the disciples of the Chanhe sect while selecting disciples. This method should be ready-made. Oh, also, I heard Yu Zhuohong mention that she once brought some cultivation methods for selecting spiritual roots to the Grand Xie Mountain auction house, and she sold dozens of jade slips in the auction house. How many crystals did he sell for each jade slip? The Yi clan's patriarch suddenly asked. Huang Su smiled and said, I didn't ask, but from his tone, it shouldn't be too much. Alas, what a waste. The Yi clan's patriarch sighed. This method is a priceless treasure, but it was sold so cheaply. What a pity. Yes. Huang Su hurriedly said, I realize the importance of this method, so I hurriedly sent Jejun and the others back to the sect to report to my sect master. However, I didn't expect so many things to happen. There are many things that you don't know. Ji Yanjinren smiled and said, as long as the Heaven Alliance doesn't give up on destroying our Taoist alliance, such strange things will happen. We can only be vigilant and treat it seriously. The Heaven Alliance? Huang Su was stunned and said in shock, how can there be people from the Heaven Alliance in the Fengyan Kingdom? Not only the Fengyan Kingdom, you should say, there are people from the Heaven Alliance in the fallen Immortal sect. Ji Yanjinren said sternly. Then he looked around and said fiercely, everyone, when you return to the sect after the Alliance conference, you must carefully investigate the background of the disciples in the sect. Search carefully and find out who the people from the Heaven Alliance are. Xian Xiaozi and the other cultivators were shocked. Ji Yanjinren's words were easy, but it was abnormally difficult to do. Since the people from the Heaven Alliance wanted to hide in the various sects, they would naturally remove all traces. Moreover, the disciples of the various sects had been in the sect for many years. How could they find any evidence? Yes, we understand. Everyone answered in unison. However, their voices were a little low. Clearly, they all knew that this was an impossible task. Then, the Yi clan's patriarch, Fairy Mo Yun, and a dozen tribulation-passing cultivators asked Huang Su some questions about Zhang Xiaohua. Only then did the Alliance conference calm down. Everyone was waiting for Old Man Gu Qiong. However, Old Man Gu Qiong's nascent soul had to cross half of the Yilin continent. In order to ensure the success of the nascent soul projection, Old Man Gu Qiong did not leave his nascent soul in his physical body. Therefore, no one knew where Old Man Gu Qiong was or what had happened. However, after only an hour, the Alliance conference became lively again. This was because the Taoist Alliance's disciples in the Dragon's Tomb had found 10,000 children to be selected from the Taoist Alliance's sects nearby. Taoist Jiyan and the others smiled as they looked at the leaf that was several acres large and the 10,000 children sitting on it. Of course, there was a hint of bitterness in his smile. The fact that 10,000 children had been found in such a short time meant that the Taoist Alliance's sects really did not have a practical selection method. They had no choice but to temporarily leave these children in their sections. Let the disciples choose 10 children for each of us. Ji Yanzhenren looked at the tribulation-passing cultivators on his left and smiled. Let's compare the selection method we used before and the one we modified with this spiritual root selection method. What do you think? Very well. The cultivators all stood up and answered with smiles. Upon hearing Taoist Master Ji Yan's orders, the Tao Alliance disciples guarding the children immediately raised their hands and casually picked a few hundred children out of the 10,000 children and brought them to the edge of the leaf. Ji Yanzhenren and the others walked to the leaf and stood among the children casually. Then, they began to activate their spells to select the children. Although the spiritual root selection method was simple, Ji Yanzhenren and the other tribulation-passing cultivators did not dare to be careless. Each of them cast their spells seriously, and it took them 5 minutes to select one child. Ji Yanzhenren looked around in shock. The Yi family's patriarch, Wanderer Fu Bo, and the others who were closest to Ji Yanzhenren had the same expression on their faces. Everyone, Ji Yanzhenren said, I'll announce the results of my selection first. But everyone nodded with eagerness in their eyes. Chapter 4888. Taoist Jian looked at the 10 children sitting cross-legged in front of him and pointed at them. I used the method before the spiritual qi of heaven and earth mutated to select the 10 children. I was only certain of one of them, and the other 9 were all blurry. When I used the bone-sifting technique, I was able to confirm that 3 out of the 10 children could cultivate, and 1 out of the 10 children could not cultivate. As for the other 6 children, I was not sure about them. The child I was certain of was also one of the 3 children. At this point, Taoist Ji Yan paused for a moment and said excitedly, but I used the spiritual root selection method to confirm that 3 children have earth spiritual roots, 1 child has water spiritual roots, 1 child has fire spiritual roots, and the other 5 children have no spiritual roots. Moreover, among the 3 children that I was able to confirm earlier, only one of them had the earth spiritual root. Furthermore, this child was selected by this old man using the bone-sifting technique. Hee. Fairy Mo Yun laughed and said, the result of my selection was the exact opposite of yours. Among the 10 children, I was certain of 5 of them with the ordinary selection method and 6 were blurry. However, with the clear mind technique that I modified, I was certain of 3 and the other 7 were blurry. On the other hand, I was only certain of 1 with the so-called mutated ice spiritual roots and the other 9 had no spiritual roots. Fairy Mo Yun, how can you call it the opposite? My result is the opposite. A tribulation-passing cultivator laughed. I used the ordinary selection method to select 5 disciples, but the selection method eliminated these 5 disciples. The other 5 disciples that I couldn't identify had earth spiritual roots. Then Yi clan's ancestor and the others also reported the results of their selection. Apart from a few cultivators, most of the cultivators used the ordinary and improved selection methods to select disciples, which were different from the selection method. While the cultivators were discussing the advantages and disadvantages of the spiritual root selection method, Taoist Ji Yan said, everyone, no matter how good the spiritual root selection method is, after we use it, we can determine which disciple is unsuitable for cultivation, right? This is something that the previous selection method can't compare with. Based on this alone, I feel that the spiritual root selection method is extremely ingenious. That's right, Vice Alliance leader is right. Everyone was convinced. Furthermore, Fairy Mo Yun said softly, when I was selecting my disciples, I used a secret technique. This secret technique is not something that ordinary cultivators can use. When I activated the spirit root technique, it seemed to be very easy. Even ordinary disciples can use it. Okay. Ji Yanzhenren nodded and said, I've asked some disciples of the Dragon Tomb to study this technique. Now, I'll call them in and have a look. Subsequently, 10 spirit severing stage disciples, 10 nascent soul stage disciples, 10 golden core stage disciples, and 10 foundation establishment stage disciples flew out from the trunk and landed on the huge leaf. At Taoist Ji Yan's command, each of the 40 disciples began to select disciples with spirit roots from the 10 children. In just half a meal's worth of cultivation techniques, 400 children had finished their selection. Ji Yanjinren and the others were still worried, so they personally checked again. They were surprised to find that, except for 3 foundation establishment disciples and 1 golden core disciple, the results of the other disciples' selections were exactly the same as theirs. In other words, this spirit root selection technique could be used by low-level cultivators, and the accuracy rate was very high. After the 40 disciples left, Ji Yanjinren looked at the selected disciples without saying a word. No one knew what he was thinking. At the alliance meeting, none of the cultivators said anything because they knew very well what was going on. Since the disciples were selected, they naturally had to cultivate. However, with the change in heaven and earth spirit chi, what kind of cultivation technique would they cultivate? Would it be the original technique or a modified one? Ji Yanjinren was waiting for old man Gu Qiong to come back. Everything was ready, and now he only needed one thing. However, to everyone's surprise, old man Gu Qiong didn't come back even after several hours. At this moment, a disciple of the Dao Alliance appeared from a trunk to the left of Huang Su. He bowed and reported, "Vice Alliance Leader, I was ordered to lead 10,000 cultivators to Nebula Ridge through the Continent Teleportation Bridge." Ji Yanjinren was obviously anxious. Before the disciple could finish, he scolded, "Speak more seriously. Have you seen Alliance Leader? Where are the disciples of the Jianghu faction?" The disciple was used to Ji Yanjinren's scolding, so he replied concisely, "When I arrived there, Alliance Leader had been killed by nearly 10,000 cultivators of the Heavenly Alliance less than 500 kilometers away from Nebula Ridge. I led my subordinates to capture more than 1,000 disabled disciples, clean up all the corpses, and bring them back to the Dragon Tomb. After that, I followed Alliance Leader to Nebula Ridge and invited Lu Hanhuan, the sect leader of the Jianghu faction, and other disciples related to Senior Zhang." "What about Alliance Leader?" Ji Yanjinren asked with a frown. "When I returned through the Continent Teleportation Bridge, Alliance Leader didn't say anything, so I don't know." The disciple hurriedly replied, "In addition, I also gave Alliance Leader the cultivation technique Jade Slip that Senior Zhang modified for the Jianghu faction." "Okay, you can leave now. Let Lu Hanhuan and his subordinates in." Ji Yanjinren waved his hand and ordered. The disciple bowed and disappeared. After a few seconds, Lu Hanhuan appeared on a leaf with Yu Zhuahong, Gao Cheng, Xiaofeng, Yun Songyu, Hong Feng, and Zhang Ji. Lu Hanhuan and the others couldn't compare to Huang Su. As soon as they entered, their faces turned pale and panicked. They looked left and right, and before they could see clearly, they saluted in panic. Junior Lu Hanhuan and the others greet Alliance Master. "Wait, don't be nervous," Ji Yanjinren said with a smile. "You are now the great heroes of the Taoist Alliance. Speaking of which, I'm the one who should be saluting to you. If it weren't for you, how could the Taoist Alliance obtain the spiritual root selection method? If it weren't for the spiritual root selection method, how could the Taoist Alliance select suitable disciples in the future?" Hearing Ji Yanjinren's words, Lu Hanhuan finally felt relieved. He knew that no matter what happened in the future, he would not have to worry about the Jianghu faction being destroyed by other factions. Therefore, Lu Hanhuan hastily bowed again and said, "Since Junior and Junior's Jianghu faction are part of the Taoist Alliance, we should do our best for the Taoist Alliance. What Junior did was what I should do, and I don't deserve Senior's thanks. Moreover, it was Senior Zhang who gave all of this to my Jianghu faction. If Senior wants to thank me, you can go and find Senior Zhang." "Ha, I'm not surprised by your favor. I don't deserve it. Sect Leader Lu, you're really good." Ji Yanjinren smiled and said, "Chu Pu Immortal Alliance Leader, how can such a strong cultivator not be a member of the Immortal Alliance?" Shocked, Wen Jie hastily stood up and said with fear, "It's all Junior's fault. After the Alliance conference, Junior will definitely invite Sect Leader Lu to join my Chu Pu Immortal Alliance." Ji Yanjinren nodded slightly and said to Lu Hanhuan, "Sect Leader Lu, can you tell me about your encounter with fellow Taoist Zhang Xiaohua?" "Alliance Leader," Lu Hanhuan hastily called out, "You're already praising me by calling me Hanhuan. Please don't call me Sect Leader anymore." "Hanhuan, tell me what happened in the past month slowly." Ji Yanjinren smiled. Lu Hanhuan cleared his throat and was about to speak. Rumble! A series of thunderclaps came from the distance. When the thunderclaps got closer, the void began to show folds and black and white lines collapsed into the void. Woo! A strange whistling sound suddenly rang out and the collapsing void shrank rapidly. Then, with a flash of red light, old man Guqiong's nascent soul flew out of the collapsing void like a stream of light. An aura as vast as before surged in all directions like a tide. Whoosh! As soon as the nascent soul appeared, old man Guqiong's body glowed with a dazzling brilliance and the nascent soul flew into it faster than a swallow returning to its nest. When old man Guqiong's nascent soul fused with his body, the lightning flashed and chased after him. It flickered for a moment before disappearing along with his aura. Lu Hanhuan waited tactfully while Ji Yanjunren stared at old man Guqiong without blinking. Old man Guqiong opened his eyes and nodded at him before closing his eyes to meditate. Ji Yanjunren then looked up at Lu Hanhuan and said, "Hanhuan, Alliance leader is back. You can speak now." Lu Hanhuan agreed and told Ji Yanjunren about how Nuo Yecheng discovered the heavenly cycle demon subduing star formation, how Lu Qingyu failed to break it, how he invited Hong Feng, Yu Hua, and Zhang Ji to go with him, and how he discovered Xiaohua. Finally, Lu Hanhuan said, "In order to thank Senior Zhang, I agreed to let Nuo Yecheng's master, Lu Qingyu, and Yu Hua come with me." Of course, Lu Qingyu and Yue Hua seemed to have told Senior Zhang about this before, but Senior Zhang didn't agree at that time. After that, Lu Qingyu found Gao Cheng and asked me to mention it in front of Senior Zhang. I thought that it was a good thing to help them, so I agreed. Who knew that Senior Zhang didn't refuse? So, Senior Zhang left Chan He sect with the three of them 10 days before Alliance Master came to Nebula Ridge. Hanhuan, do you know where fellow Taoist Zhang went? Ji Yanjunren thought for a moment and asked with a trace of regret and a trace of hope in his eyes. Chapter 4889. Lu Hanhuan was a little hesitant. When he was reporting, he had only described Xiaohua's deeds in the Chan He sect in detail. In fact, he hadn't revealed anything about Xiaohua. Now that he heard Ji Yan's question, he said, "Alliance Master, I don't know where Senior Zhang went. However, when Senior Zhang was in Xingyun Ridge, he asked me about the location of the Wuming Mountain Range. Moreover, after Elder Yu Zhuohong returned from the Grand Pavilion Mountain Auction, he gave Senior Zhang a jade slip that recorded the transmission route from the Fengyan Kingdom to the Heaven Alliance." Master Ji Yan raised his eyebrows and asked faintly, "Hanhuan, let's not talk about fellow Zhang's whereabouts for now. Let me ask you, what do you think of the spiritual route selection method?" Seeing that Master Ji Yan didn't ask about Xiaohua's whereabouts, Lu Hanhuan was relieved and said respectfully, "My cultivation is shallow, so I don't dare to say too much about the subtleties of the cultivation method. However, as the sect master, I think that the spiritual root selection method can completely replace the spiritual root selection method before the spiritual chi of heaven and earth changed. Moreover, the spiritual root selection method seems to be more reliable than the previous method of determining physique and bone structure. The disciple that my Chan He sect chose was originally a backup plan to deal with the Flying Shadow sect's encirclement. However, the Flying Shadow sect was destroyed by Senior Zhang, so I ordered the Yulan Palace to teach these disciples the most basic chi refining method. As far as I know, 99% of the selected disciples can easily draw chi into their bodies, which is more than before the spiritual chi of heaven and earth changed. However, because of my hesitation, Senior Zhang just gave me his modified cultivation method, so I didn't let the disciples teach these cultivation methods to the new disciples. Master Ji Yan looked at Elder Gu Qiong, who was meditating with his eyes closed. He didn't know if Elder Gu Qiong was comprehending the modified cultivation method or adjusting his breath. He then asked Lu Hanhuan, "Hanhuan, have you seen these modified cultivation methods? What do you think of these cultivation methods?" When Lu Hanhuan heard that, a bitter smile appeared on his face. He said embarrassedly, "Reporting to Lord Alliance Leader, my Chan He sect has not been passed down for a long time, and I have little talent and knowledge. Although these cultivation techniques are modified according to my Chan He sect's cultivation techniques, after I read them, although I can understand what has been changed, I still know what it is but not what it is. Furthermore, I haven't had the time to let my disciples practice these techniques. It's really hard for you to ask all these questions. Never mind. Hanhuan, your Chanhe school has made a great contribution. After the conference, a disciple will give you my token. If anything happens to your Chanhe school in the future, you can directly report to me. Reverend Ji Yen said with a smile. Lu Hanhuan was overjoyed and bowed to express his gratitude. Ji Yanjinren looks at the disciple behind Ji Yanjinren and asks with a pleasant expression, which one is Hong Feng and which one is Zhang Ji? Hong Feng and Zhang Ji hurriedly bowed again and said, Junior greets Lord Alliance Leader. Tell me in detail how you met fellow Zhang. Ji Yanjinren doesn't want to let go of any details and asks again. Hong Feng and Zhang Ji didn't dare to be negligent. They recounted their encounter with Xiao Hua in the Xia mountain range. Zhang Ji even looked at Hong Feng, then at Lu Hanhuan, and said with a smile, Good, Lord Alliance Chief, this junior feels that Senior Zhang is a little strange. Oh, what's strange? Ji Yanjinren asks with interest. Zhang Ji hurriedly says, First, if Senior Zhang has been in seclusion for hundreds of years and has just come out, why is he naked? Even if his clothes are rotten, he must have prepared something in his universal bracelet. Junior didn't see Senior Zhang's storage bracelet. You're right. What's the second thing? Ji Yanjinren says with a smile. Secondly, I feel that Senior Zhang, if his cultivation base isn't as profound as ours, then he must have lost all of his magical power and is currently recovering. As he spoke, Zhang Ji stole a glance at Lu Hanhuan. Sure enough, a trace of anger appears on Lu Hanhuan's face, but it disappears in a flash. At the same time, Hong Feng glares at Zhang Ji. Ji Yanjinren waves his hand and says, Zhang Ji, you think too much. Junior doesn't think too much. Zhang Ji still says, if he still has his spiritual power, how could he only use his whistling to fight the enemy? Lord Alliance Leader? Gao Cheng seems to think of something and hurriedly says, Junior has something important to report. Ji Yanjinren seems to have other plans and doesn't want Zhang Ji to say that Xiaohua has lost all his spiritual power. Now that Gao Cheng speaks, he immediately points at him and asks, What's your name? What's so important? Junior is Gao Cheng of the Chanhe sect. Gao Cheng hurriedly replies, Although I haven't met Senior Zhang much, I know that. Senior Zhang is definitely a senior expert, not a weak one like Zhang Ji said. Ji Yanjinren laughs and asks, Gao Cheng, why do you say that? Senior. Gao Cheng replied, When Lu Qingyu begged me to put in a good word for you in front of the sect leader, he inadvertently revealed that Senior Zhang's Dharma power was boundless, and his vision was even more powerful. When Senior Zhang chatted with the Heavenly Alliance, he told them the reason for the change of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth and the reason for the aging of cultivators. What? Ji Yanjinren is shocked and asks incredulously, Did he say what the reason is? Yes. Gao Cheng is overjoyed and hurriedly says, It seems to be about the physical body and bloodline. Bloodline? Bloodline. Ji Yanjinren's eyes lit up as if he had understood something. He nodded and said, Gao Cheng, you're right. Is there anything else? Gao Cheng certainly wouldn't let go of this opportunity and told him what he knew. When Gao Cheng finished, Yu Zhuohong hurriedly says, Lord Alliance Leader, I also have something to report. At this moment, Old Man Gu Qiong opened his eyes and said, Don't worry, yes. Yu Zhuohong didn't dare to say more. He just stood there. Lord Alliance Leader. Ji Yanjinren asked worriedly, How is it? Alas, it's okay. Old Man Gu Qiong sighed and got up. If it was before, it would be nothing. Even now, it's just consuming some of my lifespan. Then Lord Alliance Leader is? Ji Yanjinren asked tentatively, comprehending those modified cultivation techniques? Yes. Old Man Gu Qiong nodded and opened his mouth again. Woo! A fiery red light spurts out, and several jade slips fell into the air. Old Man Gu Qiong pointed at the jade slips and said, Ji Yan, these are the spiritual root cultivation techniques that fellow Taoist Zhang created for the disciples of the Chanhe sect. I've taken a look at them and found that they are very complete. In addition to the 5-element spiritual roots, there are also several other mutated spiritual roots. These cultivation techniques not only involve qi refinement but also foundation establishment. The cultivation techniques of the disciples of the Jianghu sect are very common in the Tao Alliance, and the disciples of other sects can also cultivate these cultivation techniques. Therefore, make copies of these cultivation techniques and the spiritual root selection technique. After the alliance meeting, give them to every sect in the Tao Alliance and ask them to cultivate them. Ji Yanjinren suppressed his surprise and took the jade slips. After making a copy, he ordered the disciples standing outside the alliance meeting to make copies and distribute them. The Yi clan's patriarch bit his lip. After Ji Yanjinren gave the order, he said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Jiyan, let me take a look first." However, before the Yi clan's patriarch could finish his sentence, woo-woo sounds suddenly came from all over the tree of the alliance. Then the sound of wind instruments came from the void. A wave of heaven and earth's will inexplicably enveloped the entire space. This. Not only was the Yi clan's patriarch dumbfounded, but even old man Gu Qiong and Ji Yanjinren were baffled. No one could move, think, or release their spiritual force. All they could see was the roots, trunk, branches, and leaves of the alliance tree emitting 9-colored lights that fluttered in the void like fireflies. As the wind instruments became clearer, the 9-colored lights gradually gathered together to form a huge and majestic human figure. Old man Gu Qiong could not help but exclaim in his heart, "Tao? Tao Master?" Of course, the moment old man Gu Qiong recognized the human figure, a gentle voice rang in everyone's ears, "Kindness." Tao Master disappeared as soon as the word, "kindness," appeared, and the alliance meeting returned to normal as if nothing had happened. Old man Gu Qiong and the others were still baffled. Ji Yanjinren looked down at his hands and asked in confusion, "Senior Gu Qiong, what happened just now?" Nothing happened? Tao Master's departure seemed to have erased the previous abnormality. Gu Qiong asked in confusion, "Nothing happened. Didn't the Yi clan's patriarch ask you for a cultivation technique?" "Oh." Ji Yanjinren waved his hand with a smile and handed one of the jade slips to the Yi clan's patriarch. "Fellow Taoist, why are you in such a hurry? Everyone will get a copy after the alliance meeting." "Ha, I can't wait to see what's so great about this cultivation technique that even Senior Gu Qiong admires," the Yi clan's patriarch said with a smile as he took the jade slip and read it carefully with his spiritual force. Old man Gu Qiong looked around and said, "Ji Yan, leave the little girl from the Jianghu sect here. The 81 disciples of the Immortal Alliance will leave the alliance meeting for now. Set up a transmission line outside the alliance meeting and pass the spiritual root selection and spiritual root cultivation techniques to the members of the alliance meeting from the dragon's tomb so that they can comprehend them immediately." Chapter 4890. Yes. Ji Yan nodded and gave the order. Soon, all the branches of the alliance tree were gone, leaving only a leaf floating on the bare trunk where Yu Zhuahong was. "Yu Zhuahong," Gu Qiong asked, "what do you want to say?" "I gave Senior Zhang a jade slip that day." Yu Zhuahong bit his lips and said, "It recorded the teleportation array from the Fengyan Kingdom to the Heaven Alliance. I have another one in my storage ring." But Gu Qiong nodded and said, "We all know about this, so you don't have to tell anyone else. This is very important, so give me the jade slip." "Oh, what do you want as a reward?" I want to join a famous sect to cultivate," Yu Zhuahong answered without hesitation. Obviously, he already had a plan in mind. "Okay." Ji Yan had a bad temper, but he was a resolute person. He replied immediately, "As you wish. Where are the disciples of the Chongxi faction?" "Disciple is..." A low voice came from the tree trunk. "Pass my order. Yu Zhuahong is to leave the Jianghu faction and join the Chongxi faction." Ji Yan ordered, "I'll leave this matter to you. Find a suitable master for Yu Zhuahong." "Yes, master." The disciple agreed and left in a flash of light. "Thank you, sect master." Yu Zhuahong cried tears of joy and kowtowed to express his gratitude. Get up." Ji Yan said with a smile, "I'm not the Chongxi faction master, someone else is the sect master. However, the sect master won't disobey my order. You should withdraw from the alliance now. Oh, remember, carve Zhang Xiaohua's appearance into a jade slip, then give the jade slip to the alliance's disciples. Say that it's this old man's order, and have them immediately send it to Jing Longling. Then, say goodbye to the Chanhe faction master and go to the Chongshi faction. Yes, I understand. Yu Zhuohong didn't dare to delay and left the alliance conference immediately. Seeing that the space had cleared up, Ji Yanjinren looked to his left and raised his finger. Dark green light rose up layer by layer, covering the treetop. Senior Gu Qiong, did you find anything? Ji Yan asked after he had used his spiritual force to check it out. Old man Gu Qiong did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the Yi clan patriarch solemnly and asked, Yi Zhen, what do you think of this qi refinement technique? Yi Zhen withdrew his divine sense from the jade slip and handed it to the tribulation-transcending cultivator next to him. Without any hesitation, he said, when I first looked at the modification of the cultivation method, I felt that it was ordinary, but the deeper I looked, the more frightened I became. The modification of the cultivation method is like playing Go. The previous few moves were very simple, and I couldn't see any clues. Step by step, all the chess pieces were placed down, and the whole game was over. Only then did I realize that the whole game was flawless. Every move before had great meaning, and every move was a perfect combination with the chess pieces before and after. Not bad. Old man Gu Qiong nodded and said, when I came back, I started to comprehend this cultivation method. Just like what the elder ancestor of the Yi clan said, I didn't pay too much attention to it at the beginning. However, when I returned to the Alliance conference and calmed down to carefully comprehend it, I realized that, although this cultivation method looks simple, it actually opens up a new path and is a perfect match for the spirit root selection technique. Hiss. Ji Yan gasped when he heard Old Man Gu Qiong and Old Man Gu Qiong's words. He had never seen Old Man Gu Qiong praise someone like that before, and he had never seen the arrogant Yi clan patriarch praise someone like that. What a pity! Old man Gu Qiong sighed and changed his tone. I thought that Zhang Xiaohua was an itinerant cultivator of the Dao Alliance, but in fact, he might be a high-level cultivator of the Heaven Alliance. The Heaven Alliance? Ji Yan asked in surprise. Alliance Master, what's going on? Ji Yan, didn't you say that during the Alliance conference? The Heaven Alliance suddenly sent a lot of people to infiltrate our Dao Alliance in the past 10 years. You've been wondering why they did that, but I'll tell you that it's most likely because of Zhang Xiaohua. Old man Gu Qiong explained with a trace of regret on his face. After I killed the cultivators of the Heaven Alliance, I went to the western wild mountain range, where Zhang Xiaohua first appeared. Guess what I found there? It was rare for old man Gu Qiong to keep them in suspense. Unfortunately, everyone was busy reading the jade slip, and Immortal Ji Yan was eager to know the truth, so he didn't answer. Only Yi Zhen pondered for a while and asked, Senior, did you find the continent teleportation bridge? What shocked me more than the continental teleportation bridge? Old man Gu Qiong narrowed his eyes and said, it's the aura of the realm passage. Hiss. Old man Gu Qiong's words startled the cultivators who were copying the jade slips and searching for the cultivation method. They looked up at old man Gu Qiong in surprise. Senior, didn't you say that you were looking for the realm passage? The Yi family patriarch's breathing quickened as he hurriedly asked, did you find it in the western wild mountain range? No. Old man Gu Qiong shook his head and said, I came back late because I used my primordial spirit projection to look for traces of the realm passage in the western wild mountain range. However, the space within 5,000 kilometers of the western wild mountain range was closed. Except for some chaotic realm laws, there was no trace of the passage. In other words, Zhang Xiaohua didn't come out of seclusion but came back from another realm. She came to the western wild mountain range of our Dao Alliance by accident and didn't return to the territory of the Heaven Alliance. Ji Yan asked. Of course. Old man Gu Qiong said with a smile, didn't you hear what Zhang Zhixing said? When Zhang Xiaohua appeared, she was naked, so her clothes must have been torn by the realm passage. Needless to say, her storage ring might have been destroyed during the realm passage. Most importantly, Zhang Xiaohua mentioned the Defeat You Immortal Alliance. Do you remember it? Isn't the Defeat You Immortal Alliance one of the 72 immortal alliances of the Heaven Alliance? Is it near the Wuming mountain range on the southeast edge of the Yilin continent? Yes, that's right. Ji Yan's spiritual master nodded. Later, when Zhang Xiaohua found out this was the Dao Alliance, not the Heaven Alliance, she immediately changed her words and said she was going to the Wuming mountain range. If she went to the Wuming mountain range from the Dao Alliance, she would have to go to the Heaven Alliance, right? The patriarch of the Yi family pondered for a moment and nodded. Yes, didn't Gao Qing say that? When Zhang Xiaohua talked about the reason for the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the passing of one's lifespan, he mentioned the body and bloodline. As far as I know, some immortal alliances in the Heavenly Alliance near the Wuming mountain range are affected by the witchcraft of the Wuming mountain range. The Heavenly Alliance's Taoist techniques contain the power of bloodline. I didn't realize it before, but now that you mentioned it, I realized that there are traces of witchcraft in the spiritual root selection method. In this modified cultivation method, 30% of the bloodline technique, 20% of the physical body tempering technique, and 50% of the real Taoist skill. This is the characteristic of the Heaven Alliance's Taoist skill. Yi Zhen, you underestimated Zhang Xiaohua. Elder Gu Qiong said meaningfully, of the 50% Taoist skill, 30% is the essence spirit cultivation technique of the Heaven Alliance, and 40% is the real Taoist skill. Wow. Even Ji Yan's spiritual master and the others were shocked. Ji Yan's spiritual master even cried out, Alliance Master, how could this Qi refinement cultivation technique contain so many mysteries? What do you think? Elder Gu Qiong asked, if this Qi refinement cultivation technique wasn't so wonderful, how could I let all the disciples of the Dao Alliance cultivate it? Unbelievable! Unbelievable! Ji Yan's spiritual master shook his head in disbelief, clearly unable to understand. Ordinary cultivators might not understand the source of the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but how could we not know? Elder Gu Qiong continued, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth must have rushed into the Yilin continent and caused chaos. Of course, finding a space channel to go to another world is the solution. Since the Dao Alliance thought of it, the Heaven Alliance naturally thought of it as well. Zhang Xiaohua should be the cultivator that the Heaven Alliance sent to another world to find a passage. Fairy Mo Yun came to a realization. She looked at the jade slip in her hand and said loudly, Alliance Master, since he's a cultivator of the Heaven Alliance, why did he leave the spiritual root selection method and the spiritual root cultivation technique to our Dao Alliance's Chanhe sect? It's simple. If you met an ordinary sect in the Heaven Alliance, would you be stingy with some cultivation techniques? Elder Gu Qiong asked with a smile. Of course I wouldn't be stingy with ordinary cultivation techniques. Fairy Mo Yun replied, but this cultivation technique is obviously different. If you've already found the passageway to other realms, the Heavenly Alliance will soon eliminate the influence of the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in other ways. Will you still care about these cultivation methods under the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth? Elder Gu Qiong replied, moreover, you have foundation establishment, gold core, and even nascent soul cultivation techniques. Fairy Mo Yun shook her head slightly. So, Elder Gu Qiong said firmly, I might have doubted it before, but from this cultivation technique, I'm sure that Zhang Xiaohua must have found the passage to another world. Then, Ji Yan Jinren immediately said, the 10,000 disciples of the Heaven Alliance who went to the Chanhe sect didn't come for the Chanhe sect, but for the Westfield mountain range. You're right. Elder Gu Qiong clapped his hands and said, I didn't realize it before I arrived at the Westfield mountain range. Unfortunately, it was too late. I'll leave this matter to you. See if you can find out anything from the remaining disciples of the Heaven Alliance. Chapter 4891. Why do you care about those low-level disciples? The patriarch of the Yi family said with a smile, didn't Zhang Ji say that? Zhang Xiaohua has lost all his spiritual power, which is exactly the result of passing through the realm channel. Zhang Xiaohua is heading to the Heavenly Alliance according to the teleportation route given by Yu Zhuahong of the Chanhe sect. He doesn't know that his identity and whereabouts have been exposed. We just need to take the teleportation route and rush to the teleportation array to intercept Zhang Xiaohua. Hee. Ji Yan spiritual master said with a smile. That's why I asked the other disciples of the Tao Alliance to leave the alliance meeting. Then, Ji Yan spiritual master raised his voice and asked, Disciples of the Tao Alliance, have you sent any jade slips from Night Wind Valley? Vice Alliance leader, the teleportation route on the continent has been set up. Please wait for 15 minutes. A respectful voice came from the tree trunk. Okay. Ji Yan's spiritual master replied and looked around. Although Zhang Xiaohua has lost all his spiritual power, he is at least an early-stage crossing tribulation cultivator, so we can't neglect him. I'm going to issue an Earth-level alliance token and secretly order the sects guarding the teleportation arrays to pay close attention to the teleportation arrays recorded in the jade slips and even the teleportation arrays around them. If they find any trace of Zhang Xiaohua, they must report it to the Tao Alliance immediately. We're going to work in pairs and take charge of different areas. When the message is sent out, the fellow Taoists on the left should head there immediately. Okay. All the crossing tribulation cultivators agreed. Before long, the disciples of the Tao Alliance delivered the jade slips. Ji Yan spiritual master made dozens of copies and distributed the teleportation routes to the disciples. Then he assigned the disciples according to the routes. In the end, Taoist Ji Yan looked at the crowd and solemnly said, This matter is very important. If we capture Zhang Xiaohua, our Tao Alliance will be able to obtain information about the realm passageway. At the very least, we'll be able to obtain more cultivation techniques for our disciples. Therefore, this humble Taoist begs all of you. You must keep Zhang Xiaohua in the Tao Alliance. What if we can't? A crossing tribulation cultivator couldn't help but ask. I don't think so. Old man Gu Qiong said with a smile. Zhang Xiaohua has just passed through the realm channel and he has lost all his spiritual power. How can he be your match? If you find it, you will definitely be able to capture it. This junior is asking what if. That cultivator seemed to want to get to the bottom of the matter. Which crossing tribulation cultivator doesn't have a secret technique to escape? At the critical moment, how should this junior deal with it? Kill. Taoist Ji Yan said without hesitation. If the Tao Alliance can't get it, then neither can the Heaven Alliance. Old man Gu Qiong didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Ji Yan. He shook his head slightly as if he was looking at his willful nephew and said with a smile, Ji Yan, you should wait until you become the leader of the Tao Alliance. You have to understand that although Zhang Xiaohua is a cultivator of the Heavenly Alliance, she is still a member of the Tao sect. He carries the heavy responsibility of the Heaven Alliance and knows the secrets of the realm passageway. Not only is he extremely important to the Heaven Alliance, he's also extremely important to our Tao Alliance. Even if we can't capture him, we can't kill him. If the Heaven Alliance was able to escape using the realm passageway, how could the Tao Alliance, which has so many spies in the Heaven Alliance, not have received the news? Our Tao Alliance will be able to benefit from this as well. Everyone listen to my orders as the leader. Yes. It was rare for the cultivators to see old man Gu Qiong so solemn, so they hurriedly bowed and said, According to our previous discussion, if you see Zhang Xiaohua, immediately capture her. If she desperately tries to escape, you can only chase after her. Don't kill her? Yes. The cultivators replied in unison. After old man Gu Qiong gave his orders, Taoist Ji Yan waved his hand and removed the restriction. Then he ordered the 81 cultivators of the Immortal Alliance to come in and announce the end of the Alliance Conference. After the end of the Alliance Conference, the 81 tree branches turned into streams of light and escaped into the void. Taoist Ji Yan raised his hand and took out a jade rui. Then he activated his magic power and gently tapped it on the tree trunk. Boom boom boom. Loud rumbling sounds resounded. The space around the treetop collapsed. The entire treetop rotated and shrank into the trunk. The entire trunk shook violently as it slowly fell into the space below. The tree trunk broke free from the space and turned into a huge jade pillar. It really did fall into a huge hall. As soon as the jade pillar fell into the hall, It emitted colorful lights and transformed into 365 jade pillars that were more than 30 meters tall. After a while, the lights dimmed and the jade pillars stopped in the center of the hall. Then Old Man Gu Qiong, Taoist Ji Yen, and the others floated down from their respective jade pillars. After coming out of the hall, the cultivators cupped their hands and bade farewell. Naturally, the disciples of the Tao Alliance came to see them off. After most of the cultivators left, Taoist Ji Yen thought for a while and said, "Yi family patriarch, Fu Bo, Yu Hongzi, Fairy Mo Yun, follow me and Senior Gu Qiong to guard the last few teleportation arrays of the Tao Alliance. If there are no accidents, the Heaven Alliance will definitely send people to the sacrificial abyss and even break into the territory of the Tao Alliance to welcome Zhang Xiaohua. In order to be absolutely safe, let's discuss it again." Yi family patriarch was stunned and looked at Fu Bo. They exchanged a look and said with a smile, "In that case, we'll follow Taoist Ji Yan's arrangement. This way please." Taoist Ji Yan nodded slightly and raised his hand. Then, he led them through several palaces and into a very quiet hall. There were no special decorations in this hall except for some jade chairs and several jade pillars with coiling dragons, which looked very grand. Taoist Ji Yan and Taoist Ji Yan sat down and sat in front of Taoist Ji Yan. Taoist Ji Yan and the others walked to the front of the jade chairs, and Elder Gu Qiong sat down. Taoist Ji Yan and the others sat down according to the host and the guests. After they sat down, a disciple served them spiritual fruits and spiritual tea. Fairy Mo Yun took a sip of the spiritual tea and looked at Taoist Ji Yan with a smile, saying, "Taoist Ji Yan, Zhang Xiaohua is now rushing to the Heaven Alliance through the teleportation array. The other Taoists have been ordered to chase after her. Although our mission is behind, this place is very far from the sacrificial abyss. I'm afraid we can't delay, right?" Hee. Yu Hongzi smiled and put the spirit fruit in his mouth. After taking a bite, he said, "Fellow Taoist Jian, you didn't ask us to stay because of Zhang Xiaohua, right?" Taoist Ji Yan glanced at them with a smile and said nothing. Finally, he looked at Elder Gu Qiong and said, "Senior Gu Qiong, you just used the nascent soul projection technique. Did you lose a lot of your lifespan?" Elder Gu Qiong nodded and replied, "Yes. I didn't expect that using the nascent soul projection technique would consume so much of my lifespan. Plus, if that's the case..." The Yi family's patriarch hurriedly advised, "Senior Gu Qiong, please don't do anything in the future. We're here for you. You'll also consume your lifespan if you do anything." Elder Gu Qiong shook his head and looked at the palace gate in front of him. He sighed and said, "The change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is too terrifying. Zhang Xiaohua is too important. If the Tao Alliance really goes to other realms in the future, today's alliance meeting will be a milestone that will be engraved in the annals of history." Taoist Ji Yan smiled and said, "Everything about Zhang Xiaohua is still just a guess. We can't relax until we capture her and get concrete information about the realm's passageways. However, I have asked you to stay because I have something to discuss with you about making up for your lifespan." "Making up for my lifespan? Is there such a good thing?" Elder Gu Qiong said in surprise, "Why do I feel like a piece of meat pie has fallen from the sky?" "Senior, I asked you to attend the Alliance meeting because it's very important, and we need you to be the abbot. On the other hand, I want to ask you, the number one expert of the Tao Alliance, to fight against the number one expert of the Heaven Alliance." Taoist Ji Yan replied. Elder Gu Qiong frowned and asked curiously, "Could it be that Long Shenxi is also thinking about making a move?" Taoist Ji Yan nodded and looked away from Elder Gu Qiong to the Yi family's patriarch. Then he glanced at Wanderer Fu Bo, Yu Hongzi, and Fairy Mo Yun before he said, "That's right. I received a very reliable piece of news. Not only will Long Shenxi make a move, but Kong Chang, Yang Xia, Sage Jean, and Earth Spirit's Holy Mother will also make a move. That's why I asked you to stay. It'll be best if we can stop Zhang Xiaohua at the teleportation array. If we can't, it's fine. Whether we can stop her or not, we must cross the Heaven Sacrificial Abyss and head to that place." The Tao Alliance, one of the two major forces of the Yi-Lin continent, regarded Xiaohua as an enemy of the Heaven Alliance and issued an Earth Alliance token to stop him at the teleportation array. However, the Dao Alliance's Alliance Master, Old Man Gu Qiong, Vice Alliance Master Ji Yen, and even the 81 Alliance Masters of the Dao Alliance seemed to have made an extremely childish mistake. They had thought that Xiao Hua would lead the 3 Chan He sect disciples to the first teleportation formation marked on Zhuahang's jade slip. However, they neglected the fact that Xiao Hua didn't have any crystals. Even if he wanted to enter the teleportation array, he couldn't. They didn't do it on purpose. In their eyes, crystals weren't a problem at all. However, crystals were still a very serious problem in the eyes of Xiao Hua, a great saint of the human race. Xiao Hua had already arrived at the Xiehong Mountain Auction Hall. Faced with a dazzling array of items, Xiao Hua had no other choice but to covet them. The Xiehong Mountain Auction Hall was the closest auction hall to the Chan He sect. Xiao Hua thought that it was similar to the small auction hall he had seen in the Dawn Rain continent in his early years. However, when Yue Hua steered the flying boat and led him to the auction hall between the 2 mountains, he was a little dumbfounded when he saw the real auction hall. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and give it a tip. In addition, I was supposed to rest today, but because of the Alliance Master of Basking in the Moonlight 5, I'll continue to update. Thank you for your support. There are no more chapters after 10 p.m. I'm done for today. Let's wait for tomorrow. Chapter 4892. It was a valley that was at least 100 miles long and several miles wide. The valley was not straight but curved like a huge earthworm. In addition to some tent-like things on the ground, there were all kinds of buildings on the mountain walls. These buildings were all built on protruding rocks. They looked like birds' nests, beehives, flowers, tree trunks, and there were even many caves that emitted all kinds of lights. Damn it, this is the Xiehong Mountain Auction House. Xiao Hua stood on the flying boat and looked at many Qi refinement and foundation establishment cultivators flying around in a hurry. He couldn't help but sigh, looks like it's even bigger than the auction house in Jianghu City. However, after a moment, Xiao Hua laughed again, nonsense. Although the country of Xi's Imperial Thunder sect isn't the most famous of the 3 great sects, it's still ranked behind them and is considered one of the most powerful sects. The head of the Imperial Thunder sect is only at the late nascent soul stage. This Chanha sect in front of us, in the Fengyan country, not even a fart. Its head is at the nascent soul stage. The strength of the Taoist sects in the Dawn Rain continent is much weaker than the Yilin continent. In the past, when others talked to me about the Defeat You Immortal Alliance, I only thought that the Defeat You Immortal Alliance was the entire Yilin continent. Now, it seems like the Defeat You Immortal Alliance is similar to the Chupu Immortal Alliance. It's just that the Heaven Alliance is close to the millions of Meng Mountains, so the cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent know about it? The cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent don't know that above this so-called Defeat You Immortal Alliance, there are 2 colossi, the Dao Alliance and the Heaven Alliance. I still don't know how big these 2 alliances are, but I think it's something that the cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent don't dare to imagine. If that's the case, it's normal for the Xiehong Mountain Auction House to be bigger than the auction house in Jianghu City. While Xiao Hua was thinking, Yu Hua had already stopped the flying boat in a valley and explained in a low voice, "Senior, the auction house doesn't allow flying boats to fly in directly. We'll have to keep the flying boat here and fly in directly." "Oh, which sect manages the Xiehong Mountain Auction?" Xiao Hua asked casually as he disembarked from the flying boat. "Senior," Lu Qingyu said with a smile, "small sects don't have the power to manage such an auction, and large sects don't care about it. Only some rogue cultivators are interested in it. This Xiehong Mountain Auction House is controlled by a rogue cultivator called Yuhong Mountain Man." "Loose cultivator?" Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback, then he smiled again. "Loose cultivators are also so powerful." "Of course." Yu Hua pursed her lips and said with a smile, "This senior named Yu Hong is now a cultivator in the middle stage of the spirit severing stage. He is even more powerful than my sect leader. According to Elder Yuan, this senior is very good at scheming, and has a very good relationship with the nearby Immortal cultivation sects and clans. Therefore, everyone is willing to come to this Xiehong Mountain Auction House to trade." "Clans?" Xiao Hua nodded. He thought for a moment and said, in your Chanha sect's ancient records, there seems to be an immortal cultivation clan with the surname Huang. It is a relatively famous clan in Fengyan country. Is there any famous clan near this Xiehong mountain? Huang clan? Yuhua's face was slightly red. She looked at Lu Qingyu and said, does junior brother Lu know? Lu Qingyu shrugged and shook his head. Don't ask me, I also don't know. Golden core cultivators? Xiaohua looked at the two golden core cultivators and unconsciously felt a burst of pain. If they were placed in Xiaoyu continent, they could be considered as people who could call the wind and summon the rain. But in Yilin continent, they were just like him who was only in the Qi refinement realm back then. Their eyes were covered in darkness and they actually didn't know anything. Forget it. Xiaohua waved his hand and said, you all only know about Chu Pu Immortal Alliance and Dao Alliance. You don't know anything else. Just treat it as if this old man didn't ask anything. Hee, it's good that Senior knows. Nu Yeching said with a smile, if Senior wants to know about that Immortal Alliance or whatever, you can just go to the auction house and look for it. Xiaohua followed Lu Qingyu into the valley and was welcomed by a huge memorial arch. This memorial arch looked a bit strange. It wasn't the usual square, but the kind of irregular pentagon. Two light yellow and light green pillars were inserted into the ground at an angle. Some strange patterns were engraved on the pillars. Streams of heaven and earth spiritual qi fell down like silk, passing through the pillars and falling to the ground. On the ground, there were two similar pentagon outlines. Layers of ripples appeared, and at first glance, it looked like water splashes. This is a simple transportation array? Xiaohua's gaze fell, and he could already see something fishy. He couldn't help but be slightly startled. Then he looked behind the memorial arch. Sure enough, there were three similar pentagon outlines, and they also had ripples of different colors. The two cultivators who had previously walked in front of Xiaohua and the others looked left and right. They passed through the memorial arch and walked into the outlines. The two figures had just stood still when ripples gushed out like a fountain, covering the two. Light and shadow flashed, and the two figures disappeared. The two cultivators' figures had just disappeared when that huge pentagon-shaped memorial arch immediately emitted a five-colored brilliance. The brilliance gathered above the memorial arch, and the six large words, Xiehong Mountain Auction House, appeared out of thin air. These six large words were majestic and extraordinary. This is the work of Chu Pu Immortal Alliance's Alliance Master Wenjiawen? It looks like it's nothing more than this. A very untimely voice floated along with the wind. Xiaohua turned his head and saw that not more than 10 zhang away from him, a pretty female cultivator was whispering something to another man with delicate features. That female cultivator saw that Xiaohua had seen it, and she fiercely glared at him. She used her hand to pull that man's sleeve and was about to pass through the memorial arch. Coincidentally, at this moment, a gust of wind blew, and those large words with golden hooks and iron characters turned into fireflies in the wind and slowly fell down. These fireflies fell near the five outlines, and unexpectedly turned into the phantoms of five graceful and outstanding women. Another cluster of fireflies fell directly below the memorial arch, and also turned into an elegant woman. That man was being pulled by the woman, and he walked hurriedly. He simply didn't care and rushed in front of the woman's phantoms. The man stared blankly. He wanted to stop, but when he saw that it was a phantom's, his figure simply flashed, wanting to pass through this phantom's. Ouch! Suddenly, a groaning sound came from the phantoms. The man was greatly alarmed and hastily stopped. Where his gaze fell, that phantoms actually rapidly solidified. A naked female cultivator was already standing in front of him, and those towering breasts almost collided with his body. Chapter 4893. The man's face was burning and he quickly retreated. The woman pulling his sleeve didn't notice this. At this moment, she was looking up at a shop with a gourd hanging on the stone wall. The man wanted to pull his sleeve out of her hand as he retreated. The woman raised her hand like lightning and grabbed the man's wrist. She pulled him back and said, "You still want to run?" The man was originally retreating, but now he was pulled forward by the woman. He was caught off guard and collided with the woman who had just solidified. The woman's solidified figure let out a low cry and fell back as if she didn't have any magic power. The woman next to the man woke up and hurriedly raised her other hand to support the woman's waist. She cried out, "Oh, sorry, oh?" Xiaohua was originally looking at this farce, but when the woman stretched out her other hand, Xiaohua was stunned. His gaze was attracted by a plum blossom mark on the woman's left wrist. This plum blossom mark looked very familiar. Xiaohua felt like he had seen it somewhere before. While Xiaohua was pondering, the woman had already steadied herself. Although her face was slightly red, she still bowed and said, "Welcome, fellow Taoists, to the Grand Spire Mountain Auction House. I'm the attendant of the Jingping Hall. I came out in a hurry and didn't notice you too. It's okay, it's okay." The man waved his hand shyly and said, "It's not your fault. I was in a hurry and offended you." The attendant pursed his lips and said with a smile, "I wonder what the two of you are here to buy at Xiahong Mountain. My Jingping Hall is a shop opened by the people of Yuhong Mountain. The medicinal pills, magic tools, cultivation methods, and so on are all available. If the two of you don't mind, I'm willing to introduce." The man was caught off guard and said with a smile, "We're here to, Wenqing?" Before the man finished speaking, the woman next to him shouted and interrupted him. She then said to the woman, "In that case, please lead the way. We'll go take a look." "That's great. Please." The woman was very happy and stepped to the side to make some space. The man named Wenqing and the woman next to him walked into the outline. The light waves on the ground went against the flow and wrapped around the three of them. They disappeared in a moment. What surprised Xiaohua was that the woman next to the man seemed to have noticed his gaze. Even before they were teleported, she still glared at him from the light waves. "Is it necessary?" Xiaohua curled his lips slightly. "She's just a little girl who just stepped into the golden core realm. It's just..." Xiaohua curled his lips and then pinched his chin and thought, "Where have I seen that plum blossom mark? Is it in the 3 continents or the Dawn continent? Wenqing? What? Is it related to the surname when mentioned?" While he was thinking, a rather sweet voice sounded from not far away. "Greetings, seniors. Welcome to my Xiahong Mountain. What are you looking for in the auction house? I'm the attendant of the Jingping Hall. The Jingping Hall is a shop opened by the people of Yuhong Mountain. The medicinal pills, magic tools, cultivation methods, and so on are all available. If you're willing, I can give them to you." Xiaohua raised his eyes and looked over, only to see that within the pentagonal outline on the left side of the memorial arch, another beautiful woman leisurely walked out from within and was looking at them with a smile. "No need." Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "We'll walk around casually first." Lu Qingyu, who was at the side, said in a low voice, "Senior, I heard from Elder Yu that this Jingping Hall is a fair place. Moreover, because there are people from Yuhong Mountain, very few people will cause trouble here. Therefore, she usually trades in the Jingping Hall." "Yes, I know." Xiaohua nodded and didn't pay attention to him. Instead, he passed through the archway and entered the valley. After passing through the archway, it was the auction house that Xiaohua saw in the sky earlier. In the rather spacious valley, there were already many cultivators who were either stopping, strolling, or flying up and down. It looked very lively. When this lively scene fell into Xiaohua's eyes, a feeling of being separated for a long time spontaneously arose from the bottom of his heart. According to the time of the Dawn continent, it was only 600 to 700 years, but Xiaohua had experienced more than a few hundred years. After being separated for tens of thousands of years, seeing the auction house of the Dao sect again, that kind of familiarity and that kind of atmosphere easily evoked the memories in Xiaohua's heart. Huff! Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry to enter. Instead, he took a long breath and then exhaled. He greedily wanted to carve his homesickness into his soul. Faint sounds of bargaining and waves of faint magic power fluctuations attracted Xiaohua's gaze everywhere. "Senior." A somewhat wooden and somewhat sonorous voice sounded from above Xiaohua's head. "There are all kinds of puppets in this humble one's shop, which is a necessity for quiet cultivation and traveling. This humble one sees that Senior's magic power is profound and has remarkable abilities, so your vision must be extraordinary. Why don't you come to this humble one's shop to take a look?" This humble one will definitely give Senior a discount. Xiaohua raised his head and saw that on the rock wall that was more than 10 feet tall, there was a protrusion that was more than 10 feet in size. On top of it, there was a puppet that was several times the height of a person standing in midair. It waved at Xiaohua, and its vividly painted face was piled up with a smile. "Let's go and take a look." Xiaohua slightly smiled and said to Yu Hua and the others. He took the lead and walked towards the rock wall. "Senior." Yu Hua didn't dare to be negligent. She hurriedly flew to Xiaohua's side and said somewhat awkwardly, "We don't have enough crystal stones. It's okay, this old man just wants to take a look." Xiaohua's voice wasn't small. He didn't have any intention of hiding his intentions. He said with a smile, "I don't plan to buy anything." When Yu Hua heard this, her face became even redder. "Senior, welcome to this humble one's shop." Xiaohua's figure landed on the protrusion on the rock wall. The puppet immediately greeted him and said with a smile, "What kind of puppet does Senior need? What kind of puppets do you have in this shop? Can you introduce them to this old man?" Xiaohua looked at the cave that was blocked by a restriction and asked. The puppet straightforwardly replied, reporting to Senior, "This humble one's shop has human puppets, beast puppets, and bird puppets. What kind does Senior need?" "Do you have soldier puppets?" Xiaohua asked. "Tick." The puppet stuttered a few times and said again, "Senior, welcome to this humble one's shop. What kind of puppet does Senior need?" Chapter 4894. Hee, fellow Taoist, you must be joking. At this moment, light and shadow overflowed on the rock wall. A short but fat golden core cultivator hurriedly rushed out of the cave and cupped his hands toward Xiaohua. "I'm Pang Tuojin, the owner of this shop. Greetings, fellow Taoist." Xiaohua didn't reveal his cultivation at this time, and Yu Hua and Lu Qingyu behind him weren't golden core cultivators, so Pang Tuojin calling Xiaohua, fellow Taoist, wasn't disrespectful. Xiaohua smiled and returned the greeting. It's fine. This puppet is refined very well. It can be seen that fellow Taoist Pang is unique in refining puppets." "You're too kind." Pang Tuojian's face showed a trace of pride, but his words were also humble. He raised his hand and said, "Fellow Taoist, you seem to be an expert in refining puppets. How about we have a chat inside the shop?" "I was just about to nag." Xiaohua nodded and followed Pang Tuojin into the shop. After passing through the restriction on the rock wall, a space of several acres appeared in front of them. The four walls of the space were shining, illuminating the whole space. It looked no different from an ordinary shop. The space was divided into several areas. Some areas were filled with human-shaped, beast-shaped, and bird-shaped puppets. These puppets were neatly placed, and there were already many cultivators choosing them. Next to these areas were a few aura refining boys standing respectfully. There were also some damaged puppets in other areas, such as human-shaped arms or bird-shaped wings. The arrangement was a bit messy, and there were only one or two cultivators walking around casually. In the depths of the space, there was a place that occupied more than half of the space, where the materials used to refine puppets were piled up. There were even fewer cultivators there. Xiaohua glanced around and didn't see any figures there. In an even smaller area on the right side of the space, there were several shelves with some jade slips on them. They were presumably the methods to refine puppets. After looking at the layout of the shop, Xiaohua walked towards the shelf on the right side of the space. The cultivator named Pang Tuojin was surprised and quickly followed behind Xiaohua. "Fellow Taoist Pang." Looking at the restriction on the shelf, he thought for a moment and asked, "Your shop actually has so many methods to refine puppets?" Hee. Hearing this, Pang Tuojin smiled and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist, you are obviously an expert in refining. Most of the Taoist friends who came to Ai's shop would choose puppets directly, and the rest would look for the materials they needed. Only half of them would come to the jade slip that recorded the sacrificial refining method. Since fellow Taoist is also an expert, I won't hide it from fellow Taoist. There seem to be many jade slips here, but in fact, most of them are the same." Xiaohua smiled and said with a nod, "Fellow Taoist Pang is an honest person. To be honest, I was also surprised to see so many jade slips. I didn't think that there would be so many sacrificial refining methods in a place like the Fengyan Kingdom. Of course. Pang Tuojin smiled obsequiously. Xiehong Mountain is a small place after all, and the Fengyan Kingdom is not famous for its refining. I only copied it after seeing it in the Enlightenment Environment Alliance's Universe Auction. Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he asked, "The Universe Auction Hall has so many puppet refinement methods?" "Of course." Pang Tuojin answered without hesitation. The Universe Auction Hall was opened by the disciple of the Enlightenment Alliance's Alliance Master, Qi Sanren. It mainly auctions for magic tools and magic treasures, and puppets are naturally one of them. Of course, there are countless sacrificial refining methods. Xiao Hua's heart itched when he heard this, and he couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Pang, can you tell I what kind of sacrificial refining methods you've seen?" Hearing Xiao Hua's words, Pang Tuojin raised his eyebrows and looked at Xiao Hua from top to bottom. With a fake smile, he asked, "If fellow Taoist wants to buy my shop's sacrificial refining method, I can naturally introduce it to you. But if fellow Taoist wants to come to my shop to broaden your horizons, then forgive me for not accompanying you. Of course, fellow Taoist can view them in I's shop, and I definitely won't chase fellow Taoist away." "How dare you?" Lu Qingyu couldn't help but scold. "Pang Tuojin, how can you speak to Senior Zhang like that?" Senior Zhang? When Pang Tuojin heard this, he couldn't help but panic. However, he looked at Xiao Hua and said with a smile, "Since you're senior, then I'll tell you the truth. In my shop, as long as you have crystals, then you're my senior. If you don't have crystals and only want to look, then I won't accompany you even if you're senior. I'm doing business here according to the rules of the mountain people, so I'm not afraid of any senior causing trouble." After saying this, he turned around and walked away. Perhaps because Lu Qingyu called him senior, he didn't dare to offend Lu Qingyu too much. He even called a Qi refining boy over to accompany him. "Forget it." Xiao Hua smiled faintly and stopped the boy who was refining Qi. Although he didn't know how many jade slips there were on the shelf in front of him, he knew that while the Dawn Rain continent was in dire shortage of jade slips for cultivation techniques, weapon refining techniques, alchemy techniques, and so on, the Lin continent was filled with jade slips for cultivation techniques. This also caused the Lin continent to have far more Taoist cultivators than the Dawn Rain continent, and the Taoist cultivators' realm and strength were also far higher than the Dawn Rain continents. Of course, he also understood that no matter how many cultivation techniques there were, human nature was always so real. Damn it. Yu Hua couldn't help but shout, "He's such a snob. Although we don't have many crystals, but..." But what?" Xiao Hua laughed and said, "Don't be fooled by him. He's not the only one bidding for cultivation techniques to refine puppets in this auction. If we want to buy them, we have to go to another shop." "That's right. Even if he's the only shop in this auction, we can still go to Chiyu auction." Nuo Yeching said fiercely. That's right. Let's go." Lu Qingyu also laughed loudly and followed Xiao Hua out of the shop. After leaving the shop, Xiao Hua smiled and said to Lu Qingyu, "Qingyu, it seems that without crystals, I can't even be a senior anymore. Let's hurry up and find a place to bid. Let's first sell some cultivation methods and get some crystal stones." "Senior, I'll let you know." Lu Qingyu, who had been standing on both sides of the valley, replied, "Senior, these shops on the stone wall are all for sale. The auction should still be in the valley." Previously, this junior specially asked Elder Yuan, "Other than selling cultivation techniques to Jing Pringtang, there's another way to sell them at the auction. As for when the auction will start, this junior doesn't know. If senior wants to know, this junior will go and find out. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and give it a tip. Chapter 4895. Go quickly. Xiao Hua nodded. Yes. Lu Qingyu agreed. Just as he was about to fly away, Yu Hua spoke again. "Junior Marshal Brother Lu, please wait a moment." "What's the matter, Senior Marshal Sister?" Lu Qingyu stopped and asked. Yu Hua said to Xiao Hua, "Senior, Junior wants to go with Junior Marshal Brother Lu. When we find the place of the auction, Junior will first show the jade slips we prepared. If Senior is interested, why don't you let Yiqing take you around the auction house of Xiehong Mountain? Xiaohua nodded. He raised his hand and pointed to the side of the valley and said, "Go ahead. This old man and Yiqing will walk slowly along this valley. When you find something, come and find us." But Yu Hua said and gave a few messaging talismans to Nuo Yeqing. Then, she hurriedly flew into the valley with Lu Qingyu. Afterwards, Xiaohua strolled around many shops with great interest. They either sold talismans, medicinal pills, magic tools, or materials. Just as Xiaohua thought, in the shops that sold talismans, whether it was the materials used to make talismans or the method to refine talismans, they were all complete. There was no shortage or defect. All kinds of talisman brushes, talisman papers, talisman inks, fireball talismans, icicle talismans, and so on were placed on jade shelves or restrictions, allowing people to bid and buy at will. In the shops that sold medicinal pills, there were all kinds of spiritual grasses and spiritual fruits. Some of them were even unknown to Xiaohua. Especially the pill recipes that Xiaohua cared about, they were all complete and there was no defect. Just the medicinal pills that qi refining cultivators could take, there were over 100 kinds in one shop. In the shops that sold magic tools, all kinds of magic tools were placed in an orderly manner. There were also all kinds of refining materials. As for the refining method, just like what he saw before, all kinds of jade slips were also available for purchase. What made Xiaohua sigh with emotion was that in a small shop, Xiaohua also saw the complete cultivation methods of qi refining, foundation establishment, and jindan. Moreover, the owner of the shop also promised that if Xiaohua had enough crystal stones, he could provide the complete cultivation methods of yuanying and divining. Coming out of the shop, Xiaohua looked at the setting sun in the valley and could not help but sigh in his heart. AI, this Yilin continent, is indeed a paradise for Taoist cultivators. Not to mention some large city, even this tiny Xiehong mountain auction ground is like heaven and earth when compared to Dawn Rain continent. When Xiaohua first came to the auction house, on one hand, he wanted to obtain some crystal stones. On the other hand, he wanted to plunder some cultivation methods and pill recipes. But after looking around for so long, Xiaohua discovered that this place was still desolate. Cultivation methods and pill recipes were still of a low level. He already had a lot of these things in his space, so there was nothing he wanted to buy. Not to mention that he didn't have too many crystal stones right now. Senior. At this time, Nuo Yeqing whispered, "Master has been gone for a long time and hasn't come back. Junior had sent a message earlier, but Master didn't come back. Could it be that something happened?" Xiaohua also felt a bit strange, but he smiled and said, "It should be fine. This old man has been observing all this time. The Xiehong Mountain auction ground is for foundation establishment and aura refining cultivators. Aura's core disciples only account for 20%, and there are only a few nascent soul cultivators. Your master and the others are all in the Aura's core realm, so there shouldn't be any problems in this auction ground. Let's go. This old man also doesn't want to look anymore. We'll go look for them." "Yes, this junior has just inquired. The auction ground that Master mentioned just now is right in front of us," Nuo Yeqing said and pointed to a bright and resplendent place in the distance of the valley. The valley was not perfectly straight. When Xiaohua and Nuo Yeqing turned a big corner, they discovered that there was a hill-like protrusion in that place. It bulged out from the stone wall, and there were many holes on it. Many cultivators were flying into these holes from various places. "Let's go, let's go." Xiaohua and Nuo Yeqing had just flown close when they heard the extremely excited shouts of several young aura refining disciples above them. "If we're late, I'm afraid we won't be able to snatch it." My goodness, it's actually a cultivation method that relies on the mutated spiritual qi to cultivate. Just thinking about it makes me excited. Although these disciples had already flown past, their voices still floated into Xiaohua's ears. "Of course, I've been cultivating with my sex cultivation method for several years, but I haven't made any progress. I thought there was something wrong with my cultivation, but Master secretly told me that it wasn't my problem, it was the spiritual qi of heaven and earth." Look." Xiao Hua said with a slight smile, "Your master made a big move. Even if you sent 10 summoning talismans, I'm afraid he still wouldn't be able to get away. This is all due to Senior's merit." Nuo Yeqing said very respectfully. "Merit?" Xiao Hua was slightly surprised and looked up and down at Nuo Yeqing. Nuo Yeqing hastily sped up and said, "Senior, let's quickly go and help Master." Xiao Hua smiled and didn't ask much. His figure streaked across the air and strode towards the light shadow. Without waiting for Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeqing's figures to fall into the cave, they saw several qi refining disciples excitedly flying out. As they flew, they whispered, "Oh, we've made a fortune. Such a miraculous cultivation method is actually sold so cheaply. If I were to sell it, I wouldn't sell it for less than 10 top-grade crystals. What do you know?" Another qi refining disciple also happily said with a smile, "This is called small profits but quick turnover. A qi refining cultivation method that costs 10 top-grade crystals. Who would buy it? Do you think I can afford it?" "Senior brother?" One of the female cultivators with ponytails blinked her big eyes and asked in a low voice, "Such a cheap cultivation method, could it be fake? Who would have such a good cultivation method and not keep it for themselves? Why would they take it here and casually sell it? Didn't they say it already? This cultivation method was modified by their grandmaster. They still have a lot of it. Because they know that the spiritual qi of heaven and earth has changed, many cultivators' cultivation methods are not suitable anymore. That's why they took it out to sell." Another disciple immediately explained, "Moreover, they also said that this cultivation method is easy to modify. If they don't sell it now, they won't be able to sell it in the future when all the sects and clans modify it." Fourth senior brother is right. Another disciple smiled and said, "You may not know. This little brother went there early. Previously, when they were selling it, no one believed them at all. This little brother also took a look and didn't dare to buy it. But later, 2 nascent soul stage seniors suddenly came. These 2 nascent soul stage seniors seemed to be looking for something. They asked one stall after another. When they arrived in front of these 2 seniors, they didn't say anything and took out crystals to buy it. Moreover, after buying it, they immediately left. At that time, this little brother realized that these 2 seniors had already sold it here before. Therefore, these 2 nascent soul stage seniors came again to look for it. This little brother hurriedly sent a message to my fellow senior brothers. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Qidian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote, vote for a recommendation vote, collect, reward, and thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 4896. Maybe those 2 nascent soul stage seniors were also acting? The female disciples still didn't dare to believe it. However, as they spoke, they gradually flew away. Xiao Hua didn't know how the others would explain it. Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeqing landed at the entrance of the cave. In front of them was a large hall, about 100 feet in size. The hall was transparent from top to bottom, left to right, and they could clearly see some figures moving about inside. At the end of the hall, there were several doors of the same size. In front of these doors, there were cultivators guarding them. Inside the hall, there were naturally cultivators flying in front of Xiao Hua. They quickly walked through the doors, took out a crystal, and handed it to the cultivators guarding the door. Xiao Hua understood that these guards should be the disciples of Yuhong Mountain. Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeqing walked to the door. The guard asked politely, "Seniors, do you want to sell something or buy something?" Nuo Yeqing hurriedly asked, "What about selling and buying?" "I'll let you know." The guard hurriedly replied, "If you want to sell something, you'll have to pay a mid-grade crystal. Junior will give you a token, and you can find a stall inside. If you want to buy something, you'll only have to pay a mid-grade crystal." Nuo Yeqing looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Your master has already paid a mid-grade crystal. What else do we have to pay? 2 low-grade crystals are enough." "Yes, senior," Nuo Yeqing responded. She took out 2 low-grade crystals from her storage ring and handed them to the guard. After he finished speaking, he respectfully asked the 2 to enter. When he was outside the door, he didn't feel that there was anything noisy inside. But when Xiao Hua stepped through the door, A burst of noise surged like waves. Xiaohua couldn't help but frown slightly. Xiaohua released his divine sense to explore and saw that this was a palace that was dozens of acres in size. It was somewhat similar to the auction house he had seen in Jianghu City. The entire palace was divided into several areas, and each area was divided into many small sections. The items sold in the small sections of each area were different. Some were pills, some were magic tools, some were jade slips, and so on. There were quite a few cultivators in every region, some whispering, some clamoring, all of them haggling, just like the marketplace of the secular world. In the most central area, there were many cultivators gathered around a grid. These cultivators looked a little crazy and were desperately trying to squeeze to the nearest grid. They even shouted, "Senior, this is my crystal. Please give me the cultivation method. My attribute is..." Fellow Taoists. Lu Qingyu's weary voice sounded amidst the clamor. "Don't be in such a hurry. One by one, alright. I've prepared a lot of jade slips here, enough for each of you. Senior, Junior wants to bring one for Junior sister. My junior sister is of the water attribute. Senior, I have 4 junior sisters. They are of the water attribute and the fire attribute respectively." "Oh?" Hearing this, Xiaohua asked curiously, "Yi Qing, when did your master copy so many jade slips?" "Shoo." Nuo Yeqing whispered, "Senior, my master is a money grubber. I'm afraid that when he heard that you were coming to the auction, he didn't stay idle all the way." "Haha." Xiaohua laughed. He immediately remembered that when he came out of the puppet shop, Lu Qingyu was anxiously looking for the auction. It seemed that he had already prepared. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't have any intention to blame, Nuo Yeqing said again, "Senior, please wait here for a moment. Junior will go and help my master, okay?" Xiaohua nodded and said, "This old man will go and look at other places." However, before Xiaohua finished speaking, he frowned and said indifferently, "You don't have to go first. It seems that there's a good show to watch." Nuo Yeqing was slightly stunned and somewhat puzzled. However, she didn't need to look far away. In a door not far from her, a dozen Golden Core Realm cultivators wearing bright armor walked out with a spirit severing stage cultivator around them. They went straight to the crowd of cultivators. "Senior, are these people from Xiehong Mountain's Yuhong Mountain?" Nuo Yeqing was shocked and immediately understood something. She whispered, "It must be that master and martial uncle's bidding for the cultivation method attracted his attention." "That's right." Xiaohua's expression didn't change. He withdrew his gaze from other places and waved his hand. "I'll go and take a look and see what this guy plans to do." "Yes, senior." Nuo Yeqing stole a glance at Xiaohua. She suddenly felt that Xiaohua was very similar to a person she was very familiar with. However, looking at Xiaohua's back and Xiaohua's expression of contempt for the spirit-severing stage cultivator, she shook her head with a bitter smile. Since Xiaohua noticed the arrival of a group of Golden Core Realm cultivators, the cultivators standing around the aura refining disciples to watch the show naturally also noticed them. They hastily made way for them, and some cultivators who were familiar with Yuhong Mountain hurriedly greeted them. Yuhong Mountain had a smile on his face. He very elegantly nodded to the surrounding people, and from time to time he would even raise his hand to signal. He looked very amiable and approachable. When the Golden Core Realm cultivators arrived behind the aura refining disciples, they naturally didn't berate them like the people of the secular world. They released their spiritual pressure, and those aura refining disciples immediately sensed it. Although their faces were full of displeasure, they still stopped shouting and obediently made way for the lattice. Through the gaps in the crowd, Yuehua and Lu Qingyu's somewhat tired figures appeared. "Oh my, so it's the 2 fellow Taoists from the Chanhe school." More than 10 Golden Core Realm cultivators surrounded the lattice, blocking the other cultivators outside. Yuhong Mountain walked over with a surprised expression. He cupped his hands and said, "This old man was wondering who it was. We've really neglected you." Seeing the spirit-severing stage cultivators salute them, Yuehua and Lu Qingyu were somewhat terrified. They hastily came out from the lattice and respectfully bowed. "Junior greets Yuhong Mountain. Get up, there's no need to be so polite. Yuhong Mountain waved his hand and said with a smile, "This old man is very familiar with your sect head Lu. Last time, your elder you came to my Jingping Hall to sell some method for selecting spiritual roots. This old man just happened to not be in the auction house. I only found out after I came back. This old man was just thinking of finding a time to go to Xingyun Ridge. What a coincidence, you guys actually came first. Come, let's go to the Jingping Hall. This old man will let the disciples serve tea. You guys wait and tell this old man what's going on. Why is it so lively?" This. Yue Hua and Lu Qingyu were somewhat hesitant. They didn't expect that just selling some aura refining cultivation methods would attract Yuhong Mountain's attention. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Qidian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote for a recommendation vote, bookmark, and reward. Thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 4897. What? My Jingping Hall can't accommodate 2 fellow Taoists? My spirit tea isn't worthy of 2 golden core cultivators? Hermit Yuhong was a little displeased when he saw the 2 hesitating and asked coldly. Yuhua didn't dare to hesitate and hurriedly said with a smile, "It's our fortune to be able to drink tea at Jingping Hall. However, if we go, these Qi refinement disciples will be disappointed. Why don't we wait until we sell the remaining jade slips before going to talk with Senior?" "That's right, Senior Yuhong." An aura refining disciple who seemed to have some background said loudly, "Junior just came from Jingping Hall to buy a suitable aura refining cultivation method for Junior. Senior, you invited these 2 seniors, so wouldn't Junior and the others have come in vain? You're a disciple of Danshao Country's Hua Sun sect, right?" Hermit Yuhong smiled and asked softly. His tone was like the benevolence of an elder towards a junior. The disciple was shocked and hurriedly bowed. "Senior is a god. This junior is Hua Sun sect's disciple, Zhoufan. This junior didn't expect Senior to have seen this junior. This junior greets Senior." Hee. Hermit Yuhong waved his hand and helped the disciple up. "There's no need to be so polite. Anyone who comes to my Xiehong Mountains auction house is my guest. Moreover, Fairy Qingyan is a senior that I greatly respect. Her disciple came to my auction house, so I definitely can't let her disciple be deceived." "Ah? What do you mean?" Zhoufan was shocked and looked at Hermit Yuhong in confusion. He didn't seem to understand what he was saying. At this moment, Hermit Yuhong looked up at the Qi refinement disciples on his left and said loudly, "This Zhoufan is Fairy Qingyan's disciple. I can't let him be deceived. Although you're not Fairy Qingyan's disciples, you're my guest since you came to my Xiehong Mountains auction house. If you're deceived in the auction house, how can I face your seniors? This old man is a loose cultivator, so I know how difficult it is to cultivate. I also hate the dangers of fake cultivation techniques, so, in this old man's auction, I will absolutely not allow fake cultivation techniques to exist." When they heard up to here, not to mention Zhoufan, even all the nearby Qi refinement cultivators came to an understanding. Yu Hua and Lu Qingyu's faces even flushed red, and they opened their mouths with the intention of arguing. However, when Master Yuhong spoke up to here, he still didn't point it out, so it was impossible for them to brace themselves and forcefully claim this stain. "That's not right, Senior." Zhoufan hurriedly said, "Junior has just heard from some fellow Taoists that this cultivation method was identified by 2 nascent soul stage seniors before being sold. Sigh, all of you are still too inexperienced." Hermit Yuhong said earnestly. "Who are those 2 nascent soul seniors? Where are they? How do you know that those 2 nascent soul seniors are not the masters of these 2 gold core cultivators? Just think about it, a cultivation method that can be used to mutate the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, in this world, that is a priceless treasure. If they had it, why would they sell it here instead of cultivating it themselves? And why would they sell it so cheaply?" "But," Zhoufan still asked, "didn't many Qi refinement disciples already buy it earlier? I didn't see them return." Sigh, this is the brilliance of the 2 gold core disciples of Chan He sect. Hermit Yuhong sighed again. For a cultivation method to be sold cheaply, regardless of whether it is real or not, it should still be worth that little bit of crystal, right? Zhoufan, think about it yourself. If you discovered that there was a problem with this cultivation method, would you return here for that little bit of crystal? You still have the face to say that you were deceived and cheated? Senior. Yu Hua couldn't help but raise her voice. Have you seen Junior's cultivation method? How can you be so sure that Junior's cultivation method is fake? Hee hee. Hermit Yu Hong laughed. His gaze was like lightning as he looked at Yu Hua and said, "Do you still need me to see it? How can I not know what kind of foundation your Chanhe sect has? A sect controlled by a nascent soul cultivator can't even compare to my auction house. How can it have such a miraculous cultivation method? Previously, I already said that if I were Lu Hanhuan and obtained such a powerful cultivation method, I would have hidden it in Xingyun Ridge and started training my own disciples. Why would I sell it here? I won't hide it from you. Previously, when Yu Zhuahong came to sell some spirit root selection technique, my heart jumped when I heard it. Since when did the so-called spirit root appear in this world? Deceiving others in my Jingpeng Hall is equivalent to slapping my face. I haven't even gone to Xingyun Ridge, but you actually came to me again. I gave Lu Hanhuan face and wanted you to follow me quietly. Since you are unwilling, don't blame me for being impolite." Lu Qingyu was still arguing. He handed the jade slip to Hermit Yu Hong and said, "Senior, please take a look. This is really a cultivation method suitable for mutated spirit qi. This cultivation method doesn't belong to my Chanhe sect." Pa! Hermit Yu Hong's sleeves shook, and the jade slip in Lu Qingyu's hand shattered into pieces. Hermit Yu Hong said coldly, "Do you think I am slandering you? When you were selling it just now, you had already attracted the attention of my disciples. They had already given me the fake cultivation method you were selling. If I wasn't confident, why would I come here to undermine you?" Despicable, truly despicable. Zhou Fen naturally believed Hermit Yu Hong's words. He looked at Yue Hua and Lu Qingyu and said, "You are actually so despicable. When I return to the sect, I will definitely report this to my master. Fengyan Kingdom's Chanhe sect actually deceived us Qi refinement disciples. Their actions are too despicable. Let's go." A few Golden Core disciples on the left stepped forward and said coldly, "The two of you, follow me to the Jingpeng Hall. After the Patriarch deals with you, let your sect master come and ask for punishment." Damn it. Yu Hua gritted her teeth and pointed at Yu Hong Mountain. "Senior Yu Hong, if you covet this cultivation technique, you can discuss it with me. You can split it 30 to 70, 50 to 50, or even 30 to 70 is fine too. You are actually so vicious that you want to take it all for yourself. You are really too sanctimonious." Hermit Yu Hong sneered. "You are really biting back. I am in charge of such a large auction, so why would I care about your few cultivation methods? What I care about is the reputation of my auction. Disciples, why aren't you making a move? Don't ruin my auction's reputation." "Yes," the group of Golden Core disciples said. Two of them raised their hands to grab Yue Hua and Lu Qingyu. "How dare you!" Xiao Hua cursed angrily and stepped forward. At this moment, a voice came from afar. "Wait, I have something to say. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, tip it, and thank you for all forms of support.